Welcome back to another episode of Blam Blam Truckers. I'm Bees, and I'm going to be walking through some of these character classes for Everquest for a TLP. So we're not going to be covering Beast Lords or Berserkers, um, but the rest of it, we're going to look at it. I'm going to give you my thoughts, my opinions for what little that's worth. Hopefully you enjoy it, or it gives you a different look at how to play Everquest, or kind of gets you back into the game. This is really built for people coming back to EQ or just fans, um, especially people who are playing P99 or haven't played since Classic, or just haven't played a TLP in a while. I've been doing TLPs since Mangler, whatever year that came out. I do about one per year, and I'm pretty sure I missed one. But anyway, this is the screen you get to once you actually get on your server. I chose a server I'm not actually on right now. I don't play live much, but live is free to play. The TLPs are not. So, um, I'm not really going to pay for my subscription until it's time for the TLP, so probably the 21st of May. I'm recording on the 16th. So here we go. First thing you're going to do is, hey, look, it's a mouse. It's a cursor. Look at that cursor. May not be a mouse. Well, it is in my case, but it could be a trackball. It could be a trackpad, a touchpad. You could have one of them touchscreen thingies. Okay. Enter world, return home. Return home will actually bring you back to the city of your origin, which is a nice new feature. So if you log out because you can't, you're stuck, um, and you can't even get off the origin, which we talked about in one of the previous videos, you can't even get off the origin AA that you get at level 5 now. You can actually, when you log out, you just hit return home and you'll enter the game at your home city. You can reset your UI to default, and yeah, it's all pretty cool. So we're going to go to create character. All right. We want to start with bards, and Ixar can't be bards. So let's see. Barbarians, no bards. Dark elves, no bards. Dwarves, no bards. Erudites, no bards. Gnomes, no bards. Half elves, which is where we're going to start with bards. So bards are half at classic, and this teak in particular is going to start with Kunark and classic, but I want this to kind of be more of a broad for everybody video, not just for the specific rule sets of teak. So we're going to talk about classic mostly, and a little bit about, I might bring up some stuff for Kunark, but not that much. So for bards, it's half elves, humans, and wood elves. Those are your three options. And if you look at stats, the two stats you care the most about as a bard are dexterity and charisma. As a bard, most of your time will be spent performing. Strength is nice, don't get me wrong. It's nice to have a little bit of strength to do some of your melee damage. Stamina is good to have, so you can take more hits, but your um, your two most important stats are dexterity and charisma, because your two checks in the game are dexterity is a check for your whether or not you screw up a song, and charisma is a check for whether or not some of your spells land, especially your mesmerizations, charms, stuff like that. It even says it over here. It also affects the chances for charm, memory blur, mesmerization, and divine intervention spell effects to work. So bards are one of the two premier crowd control classes in the game. They're one of three classes that get Mez, if you want to count Screaming Terror, which I do, which is a Necromancer Mez. But yeah, they're really great at crowd control. Bards are the masters of group utility in a way no one else is. They cast spells without using mana. The spells continue to affect as long as you're playing that song. You can play up to 3 songs at once. Nowadays, there's this thing for bards called slash melody, which will actually play. So you would type in slash melody and then space 1, space 3, space 8, and it would play in order the songs that are in your spell slots 1, 3, and 8. And so you can set up different melodies, you can name them different things. It's pretty amazing. It's a really fun class to play. When I went on a TLP, it was the first class I played. Unfortunately, what I really wanted to do at that point was crowd control, and most people just wanted me to pull because bards are good pullers. Um, of the different factions, faction is the wrong word, of the different functions that you can have in the game, bards actually can do a number of them. They're excellent soloers, but it takes a long time to solo compared to other solo classes. Bards are excellent group members. They provide a world of utility. They're one of two classes. Bards and Enchanters are the only classes that get mana regen in Classic. Beast Lords get it in uh, when they come along, but they don't come along until Lucklin, which is it goes. I'll go all the way up to Planes of Power. So it's Classic, Kunark, Velius, Lucklin, Planes of Power. Those are the first 5 expansions. Well, the first one's technically not an expansion, but however you want to say that in your head, you know what I'm talking about, I hope, at this point. Bards have the fastest ground speed of any class with Cella's Accelerando, which you get at level 5, and it just keeps getting faster and faster the more you level. Um, it is ridiculous how fast they can run. And they take, and most of their spells, songs really, most of their spells affect the entire group. So anybody nearby in your group, if you're singing mana regen, everybody nearby you gets mana regen. If you're singing, what do you call it? Health regen, everybody gets health regen. Damage resists, they in Classic all the way up through probably until Shadows of Lucklin, um, maybe all the way up to Planes of Power. Bards have the best magic resists in the game. Only they got to be in the group with you. So if you've only got one bard in your raid, he has to be in the same group as your main tank for the main tank to be able to to have that magic resist. They don't affect the entire raid. They only affect people in the group who are nearby them. Um, they can solo because they can slow. I'm sorry. They can make your melee attacks go faster. They can make the enemy's melee attacks go slower. They can make the enemies run slower. They can make their party run faster. They can increase your strength. They can do all of that boosting, but they can only sing 3, maybe 4 songs at a time. If they're doing mezzing and they're doing the crowd control, so they're keeping things on pause for the rest of the group so the group can handle bad guys one at a time, uh, generally don't expect them to do anything else. It's kind of like having a utility knife. You might have one thing out, you might have 2 things on the knife out at a time. Maybe you've got 2 different screwdrivers on different ends of the knife out. That's what a bard is. They've got all these different tools that fold into their Swiss Army knife / multi-tool, whatever you want to call it, Leatherman. And those 2, well, they could do 1 or 2 things, 3 maybe, but they do it very well. Excellent class, fun to play, hard to master. Used to be great power levelers, but I believe they changed some functionality, so they're not. It's a lot harder to power level nowadays than it was when I first started playing on Mangler. Um, in later parts of Classic, like Kunark and Lucklin, especially in Kunark, the only way to get over haste to actually increase your attack speed higher than it should be possible to do. You need bard songs to do it. Bard song haste stacks with. So there's 3 kinds of haste, and you're going to need to know this. I wasn't planning on covering it with bards, but why not? Let's start here. So there's 3 kinds of haste. There's haste from an item. There's haste from a buff, a spell, whether you get that buff from an item or from a person. And then there's haste from bard song. And that is the only way to get over the haste cap, is with bard song. Because otherwise, and it's only certain bard songs, it's not all of them. But that is in the game, that is written into the code, so that bards can actually make a group attack faster. If you're in a pure melee group, bards are fantastic. If you're in a not pure melee group, a mix, bards are fantastic. If you're doing, basically, if you're looking for a class that's always going to have something to do, you might want to play a bard. Again, they're not high damage unless you're using your charm pets, which they are excellent at charming bad guys and using them as pets. They don't last nearly as long as enchanter pets or necro pets or even druid pets, but as far as charm goes, but it lasts long enough to be a considerable part of your um, retinue, not retinue, of your, I don't know, toolkit. You can use it when you're doing crowd control as a bard. You should be keeping, you can keep up to three or four mobs mezzed at a time, and a charmed pet. So if you're doing that, then, and when you're done with the pet, when the pet is the last mob standing, you wait for your bard song to wear off. And I forget how long their charm actually lasts on a pet. It's like 30 seconds maybe, or a minute. I don't remember. I could look it up for you guys, or you can just go check it out on, let's see, P99 website. P99 wiki would give it to you. Alakazam would let you know. There's a few other sites out there that chronicle this stuff. But once your charmed pet is low on life, release the charm and have the group kill that one next. Bards, again, excellent pullers because they can hit it. They can hit the bad guy with a snare. They're innately fast, though you really do want to sow on you if you're pulling as a bard, because Spirit of Wolf. Some people call it SOW because the word Spirit of Wolf abbreviates down to SOW. And mostly I hear people call it sew, even though sew is spelled SEW, like sew, a needle pulling thread. But that's still sow, which is a female pig. Sow is SOW. So I hear people say sow, and I want to correct them, and I'm like, that's not right. But it turns out it is right. Um, yeah, intelligence is your modifier for how much mana you have. Clarity and other mana regeneration enhancing effects do not affect bards, except for flowing thought, but that doesn't come out till Lucklin, so we don't have to worry about that in classics. So the higher your intelligence, the more mana you carry. You don't use mana for very many songs, except for your direct damage song. I think, is it Charm that also uses it? I forget. Anyway, you only use mana for a couple of songs, but it's nice to have a big mana pool. However, at character creation, you're going to want the charisma and you're going to want the dexterity. Those things are going to be with you the entire game. By the time you're done with Velius, which is only the second expansion or third, I don't know what you call it, because it's classic Kunark Velius. By the time you're done with Velius, your stats are going to be maxed out. You're going to be at 255 for everything important, and that's so. It doesn't really matter what race you choose. This isn't a race comparison video. That'll probably be the next one. This one's going to be too long as it is. But that's the general overview on bards. The next class we're going to talk about is clerics, and as you can see, wood elves can't be clerics. Barbarians can't be, but dark elves can be. And if you want to solo as a cleric, this is a great choice. Um, about some of the deities that you worship have quests in classic that give you clicky, so it has a spell effect on it that you have to click. Clicky neck pieces called symbols of the respective deity. Some of them have it, not all of them. This was something that was not fully implemented when the game came out, and they haven't really gone back and added them in. They're not that popular, but you should know about them because there's 3 that are very interesting. Um, Not super useful, all of them. In fact, the Dwarven one is not particularly useful at all, but it's a whole lot of fun. So there's 3 levels for serving Inarok. So this affects both Shaman and Clerics. I'll bring it up again when we talk about Shaman. But the third symbol for Inarok Clerics is one of the Clinging Darkness lines from Necromancers. So you can actually have, and Clinging Darkness does a little bit of damage and a lot of snare, so it slows down the bad guy. You cast it on your mob, and it slows them down, and it does a little bit of damage. And the reason why you want it slowed down is clerics are great. Clerics are the number 2 fearing class in the game. They have the same fears that enchanters get. They get them a little bit later, not a lot later. And if you can fear and you can snare, then you can kite. So before we get into what a cleric does, let's talk about kiting for a minute here. The idea of kiting, you can reverse kite with fear. With snare, you can kite, which is what bards are great at kiting. That's how they do their soloing. It takes them a lot longer than anyone else who solos to solo, but they almost never get hit or hurt, so they can do that all day. And they can solo multiple bad guys. And I've seen a bard running around both the plane of hate and the plane of fear, which are the end zones, the final zones for classic, and the planes of fear, hate, and sky. Anyway, this is what kiting is. Kiting is when you get a mob's attention, and then you slow the mob down, and you speed yourself up. So you cast snare on the mob and sow on yourself. If you have snow, if you don't have sow, then snare on the mob is usually good enough. And you get them to chase you while you're doing damage to them, and you try and stay out of melee range of them. So there's certain classes that are amazing at kiting. Clerics are not one of them normally. Dark Elf clerics, however, and reverse kiting is the same thing, only backwards, hence reverse. So you put a fear on the mob, so it runs away from you, and you put a snare on the mob, so it runs away from you slowly, and then you walk behind it and do damage to it. Whether it's spell damage or melee damage, it doesn't have a chance to turn around and hit you, so you don't take any damage. They take a lot of damage, and that's how you solo. That's how you reverse kite. And Dark Elf clerics are the only cleric that can reverse kite if they get that symbol of Inarok that has that snare on it, because that's the only way in Classic to get a snare for a cleric. So now that I've gone into graphic um, depiction of one particular aspect of the game that only one race class combo can do for clerics, let's talk about clerics in general. Clerics are the premier healing class of Everquest, and they remain that way throughout all expansions, but it's especially true in Classic, where they get complete heal at level 34. Hold on a second here. And complete heal just does just that. You wait until your friends get almost all the way down in their health bar, and then you whack them with a complete heal, and boom, they're back at full health. Now, in much later expansions, you're going to get to the point where complete heal only does so many thousands upon thousands of points of damage, and eventually, well past Classic, characters are going to be able to have more hit points than that, so complete heal is no longer a complete heal, but it is the most, in Classic, in Kunark, it is the most efficient means of healing, mana efficient means of healing in the game, because that's mana cost versus the amount of points healed. What else? Okay, so that's their main role. Their secondary role is to buff. Clerics have the best hit point and armor buff combos in the game. I think Druids actually have a slightly better AC buff than the equivalent cleric buff, but clerics hit you with 3 buffs of defense, 3 defensive buffs. They've just got the best defensive buffs for damage in the game. They have excellent nukes. I think they're the 3rd best nuker in the game, but they're not very mana efficient. That's the problem with it. Wizards are the masters of mana efficient nukers, and magicians are number 2. And then along come clerics with their ridiculous nukes. Most people aren't going to be nuking with clerics, and if you're not playing a Dark Elf, you're not going to be soloing all that much. It's just too difficult to do with the skill set you have. On the other hand, it's very easy for clerics to find a group, because everybody wants that healing that they do. In a group, I gotta tell you this, if you're at full mana, and this is true for any class except for bards, because bards barely ever use their mana. If you are at full mana as a class with mana, then you're in a group and there's fighting going on, you're wasting mana. You are wasting everyone's time if you are always at full mana, or if you're even at full mana for any length of time. As a cleric, one of my goals was to never be at full mana and never be under half mana. Like, for me, that was my happy zone. I like to keep it above 60% mana and around 70 to 80 was my golden zone. So if I'm at full mana as a cleric, and this wasn't in early levels, this is once I got a feel for how much my heals would do and how much mana it would require to cast my heals. But if I'm at full mana, I'm wasting everybody's time. I should be standing up, getting a nuke off when the mobs come in, sitting back down and metting up. And I'd get to about 90% mana. I'd get up, I'd nuke or heal or whatever I had to do, sit back down, and if I'm below 60% mana, then we're going either too fast or you're taking too much damage when we deal with whatever. The only time that is not true, that whole 100% mana is wasting mana, is during a raid. Raids are about precision, not necessarily about doing constant damage and constantly fighting things. They're about accomplishing certain goals and kills. So in a group context, that is very true. 100% mana is wasted mana. Outside of a group context, that is true. It's about tactics and thinking and making sure you're doing your job right. Clerics make they're the other class. So enchanters get all the crowd control skills, but clerics get some of them. They get pacify and they get root. Always have root up if you're playing a cleric, because you never know. Root is going to stop most mobs from being able to do damage to you, because most mobs do melee damage. That is their main form of damage. Caster mobs, root's not going to help you as much with a caster mob, but it's still going to keep them in place. So if you're fighting mobs that are melee mobs, which is most mobs, and you need to park them so that you have more time to focus on just one, root will do that for you. They're the second best rooters in the game after wizards. Enchanters are also very good at root, but clerics rely on it. They have it up all the time, just like wizards should. What else? What else do clerics get? Damage, healing, root, stuns. They have one of the best lines of stuns in the game after enchanters, and their stuns are very useful. They grab a lot of aggro. In certain circumstances, when you're thinking outside the box, clerics can pull. They're excellent pullers because that's the other line of spells they get, is the pacify line of spells, or lull. And what that does is it reduces the aggro radius for mobs. So if you got like 5 guys standing there, you lull 4 of them, and then you hit the 5th one with a nuke, and only that one will come, instead of, because the other ones don't, they're lulled, they're pacified. They don't see their buddy getting hit. They don't care, because you already got them with the spell. So what you do that makes you a great puller. You're able to pull only one mob at a time. It's a very useful thing to be able to do. Excuse me a second. All right. So, yeah, cleric is a great class. It is a relatively boring class. If you're looking for a lot of things to do, cleric's not there. You're mostly going to be sitting. You do not solo well, unless again you play the dark elf. You can wear the highest levels of armor in the game, and AC is incredibly useful for damage resistance. AC is actually better than stamina. I think it's 4 points of AC equal 10 points of stamina when you're talking about melee damage, which is most of the damage in the game. Resists are better than stamina when it comes to magic damage, but that's a different discussion. Clerics are great at being able to take a hit, especially dwarves. So let's go through and look at the stats of clerics. So this is the stats for wisdom, by the way, is your main stat. Wisdom determines how much mana you have as a priestly class. So shaman, clerics, and druids, as well as paladins and rangers, all use wisdom as their mana class. Pure casters or int casters use intelligence, and that's shadow knights, necros, mages, enchanters, and wizards. Oh my. So wisdom is what you want to put most of your points into. If you have some points left over, it usually goes into stamina, with the exception of dwarves, and I'll show you why. So we'll just do this alphabetically. Notice how the dark elf here is at 118 wisdom, which is the highest you can start except for high elves. It's the second highest you can start in the game. Dwarves, make sure it goes to cleric because they like to randomize your class when you change your race. Dwarves also are at 118 wisdom. Okay, great. So what's your secondary stat for clerics? Stamina. Now, this is not how I like to do my build. I go to the advanced thing and I change my build up when I'm making a character, because it turns out agility, which has a very, very small effect on your AC after you get to 75. Is my dwarf at 75 starting? No. So let's take my 5 points out of stamina and put it into agility. There's no more points in there. Generally, you're not going to be looking for agility items after this. You hit 75, you're golden. But wisdom, you're going to want wisdom to get to 255 first. After that, the other thing is you really want to be interested in is strength. Now, that's not because you are going to be doing much melee combat. You're not. It's because the gear you carry is so very, very, very heavy. So having a high strength means you're able to wear a lot of armor, and weight matters in EverQuest. You're going to be able to wear the best armor in the game and take the most hits in the game, or a lot of hits anyway, because you're wearing the best armor. Because you have enough strength to do it without being encumbered and walking slower. The other thing to remember about dwarves is they can wear the symbol of Brel Cyrillis, their god. Hold on one second. Now, I only told you about the final symbol for the Dark Elves because that's the very important one. The fun thing about dwarves is both of their symbols are really nice. They're not great. They only get 2. They're not the best stats ever, but the first symbol allows you to cast the spell Strengthen, which makes you stronger, or makes your target stronger. They're the only clerics that can do that, which is nice. Well, technically, half-elves can be, not half-elves, halflings can be clerics of Bel Cyrillis, so they can get these symbols too. But their second symbol allows them to summon beer, which does not help you in game except to raise your alcohol tolerance, but it is a lot of fun. It's just a neat little thing. It's very class appropriate. I get a kick out of it. The main reason I always recommend dwarves for clerics is because they have the second highest wisdom in the game, and they have the highest strength, the highest stamina, and they're just the best. And they're very centrally located. I haven't been talking about location because we're not talking about races, but dwarves are very central, are arguably the most centrally located class in the game. Starting area in the game, it's either dwarves or it's humans in Freeport, humans and half-elves in Freeport, one of the two. But we're covering the rest of the classes here. So erudites, I'm sorry, the rest of the races I can do this. Again, 118 wisdom. Stats, not much better than the Dark Elf if we hop over to the Dark Elf. Yeah, 65. Agility 90, yay! Stamina 75. Erudite. Strength 65, not great. Stamina 80. Wisdom, it's up there. They're fine. Eventually your stats will even out, but in Classic, dwarves are just, they have the strength and the stamina. And again, their agility is below 75. So you're probably going to want to take the stamina out and put it there for the agility so you don't have to worry about that. So your dodge is up as high as you're as hard to hit as everyone else will be. Gnomes. Do not make a gnome cleric. Look at that low wisdom. It's 16 points lower. Look, if you want to play a gnome, that is not going to be affecting you come Velius, which is coming soon enough. And it's not going to have that big of an impact later on. But they're on the far end of Fadewar, and low strength, decent agility, but anything over 75 is the same thing basically. Okay stamina, they're a short race. If you want to play this for flavor, go for it. If you're looking at pure stats, they're not that great. Half-elves cannot be clerics. Halflings can be clerics, and they're a fun choice. Very centrally located at Rivervale in the middle of Antonica, the main continent. It's about a half-hour run to Freeport, well, a little less than half an hour, maybe 20-minute run to Freeport, maybe 40-minute run to Quanos. And yeah, as far as central location goes. As far as stats go, 75 strength, second best so far, sadly. Agility is over 75, good. Stamina, 85, again, second best so far. Or, yeah. And wisdom, 115. They're only 3 points behind, as opposed to 16 points for the gnome as far as second best wisdom in the game, putting them in the third best wisdom in the game. High elf. Now this is a choice most people make for cleric, and with 130 starting wisdom, I don't blame them. Lowest strength so far at 60, stamina of only 75. Yeah. They also get 3 tiers of symbols. They're all nice. None of them are really game-changing like um, no other cleric has something as game-changing as that snare, as that Inrock symbol. The other thing to remember, I didn't even bring this up, is Dark Elves and Halflings both start with the racial hide. It's only at 50, but that's your one chance at becoming invisible. You can't move, but if you're not moving, you can hit hide and boom, you're invisible. It's it's a nice little ability. So let's pop up here to Cleric again. I don't have much more to say than 130 wisdom, is that you have 130 wisdom and 130 wisdom. High Elves also have um, excellent racial chain armor that I think comes out in either Kunark or Velius. So that's nothing to sneeze at, but that's a whole lot better for the int casters than it is for the wisdom casters, so it's not bad for the wisdom casters. They have the highest charisma in the game. Charisma does have an effect on the divine intervention spell, but I don't think that comes into the game until Shadows of Lucklin, Plains of Power. So it's not a classic thing to consider. Technically, charisma also modifies your pacify line of spells, but it's not that big of a skill. It's not that big of a check. It checks against their magic resist first, and most mobs in Classic have low magic resist. You're not going to be pacifying dragons, even with a high charisma, generally. But most mobs, gnolls and stuff like that, one cast works just fine. Humans. Okay. Cleric, 110, beating out gnomes. Humans have a base of 75 before you get your class in every skill and every attribute before you get your class bonuses, and then you get your points to allocate. Humans are, they're good. They're good at everything. They're great at nothing. That's all I have to say about that. You have a minimum of 75 in every attribute. That's nice. It's a nice strong base. You have no racial abilities. You have bad night vision, just like erudites. Erudites and humans have bad night vision. Decent strength, 80. Decent stamina, 80. Agility over 75 or equal to, perfect. Wisdom, 110. Humans make good everything. There's nothing they do that they're bad at. There's just everybody specializes in something better than humans do. However, they look pretty cool, and they look darn right human. And yeah, they're they're not bad. And if we keep clicking this, you'll get different facials and hairstyles. And you can even change that. I didn't show you this, but you can change that in the appearance section. Ixar cannot be clerics. Ogres cannot be clerics. Trolls cannot be clerics. Vashir are not in the game. Wood elves can't be clerics. Froglocks don't come in until later in the game. After Vashir. Ixar is the next race, and Kunark the second expansion. Vashir comes in Plains of Power, and then Legacy of Yakisha brings in the Froglocks, and then what is it? I forget what expansion the Draken come into play. But that's it for clerics. Next class is Beast Lord, no Berserker, no Cleric, is Druids. There are only 4 races that can be Druids. It is, and we can just go through and double check this. So, Barbarians, no. Dark Elves, no. Dwarves, no, which is too bad. I think Dwarves would actually make very good Druids. Erudite, no. Gnomes, no. Half-Elves, yes. Halflings, yes. What is this? High Elves, no. Humans, yes. Ixar aren't in the game yet. Well, they will be for Kunark. Ogres, no. Trolls, no. Bashir, no. I think Draken can be just about everything. But again, they're the last class added, and they come much, much later. Froglocks, no. And Wood Elves, yes. Okay, there's two. Most druids are one of two things. They're either. We'll do the races first because it's on my mind. And if you go to advanced, you'll see the stats. You click on druid, and you'll see why. Wood elves and halflings have the highest wisdom, and they are wisdom casters. So you're going to want that. Again, make sure agility is over 75. Oh, look, it is. And stamina and intelligence is not intelligence. And stamina is the next thing you want to buff up for taking hits. So wood elves and halflings. If we go to halflings, we're still on druid. Good. 115 each. Half elves, and put us on druid, only have a wisdom of 95. Now, if you happen to like the look of a halfling or a half elf, go for it. Again, eventually that's going to all even out. Not in classic, it'll start evening out in Kunark, and 95 versus 115 is a 20-point difference. In humans, if we look at humans and click on druid, are at 110 versus, again, 115. That's not that big of a difference. Humans don't have night vision. Wood elves and halflings not only get night vision, these guys get hide and sneak as racial skills, and some magic resist. I think it's poison resist and disease resist. Not a lot, just it's nice to have. And wood elves get forage, which you'll get as a skill as a druid anyway, but they start with 50 in forage. And they also get hide as a racial, which is nice. What else? That's it for races. Play what you like. It's not that big of a difference. I think cleric is one of the few that actually have something that can change the game drastically. Otherwise, play what you like. And you can consider starting areas, but I'm going to do a separate video on that. What do druids actually do? Everything. So you know how I said bards do a little bit of everything? Yeah, well, druids do a lot of everything. They have damage over time spells. They are the third best damage over time spells in the game. It goes shamans or necros are 1 or 2, and then come druids. They do direct damage. Wizards have the best direct damage in the game. Mages have the second best direct damage in the game. Then come clerics, then come druids. They can teleport. Wizards have better teleportational spots to go to, not by much, mind you. Wizards are the only class that can teleport you to the planes, for instance, but druids can teleport. That's incredibly useful. There's only 2 classes that can teleport. They're number 2. The reason why I say wizard ports are better is they're closer to towns, and generally you're trying to get to a town. Druid ports are generally further out and farther away from most places you're actually trying to get to. Not by a lot, usually by they're a little bit farther away in the zone, or they're in a different zone, and wizards just have a few more teleportation spots. That's an average thing. Like the fastest way to get to get a translocate, which is where you teleport someone else but you don't go yourself. The fastest way to get a translocate to Quainos is to Surefall. The fastest way to get to Quainos is for a wizard to take you to West Corana and then evac, and that'll bring you right to the zone line, and then it's less than 2 minutes to Quainos from there, including load times. Yeah. Druids, but if you're looking for a teleporting class, druids are one of the 2 teleporting classes in the game. It's an easy way to make money is teleports. Oh, something I forgot to mention about clerics. There's only 3 classes that can res in the game, and clerics are the absolute best at it. They're known for it. It is one of the main things clerics do. I should have mentioned that during the cleric talk. Yeah. And then clerics, the reason why they're the best at it is they give the most experience back. You lose experience when you die in this game, and clerics give it back to you. They're very useful. You can make some money rezzing. You can make money teleporting. People will pay you to have you teleport them around the world. It's generally not a lot of money. Like I like to tip, depending on where we are in the TLP, I'll tip like at the beginning of the TLP, I try and tip 1 platinum to have me teleported somewhere. Once I actually have a big supply up, I'll pay like 10 plat, which isn't a ton, but teleports only take what? First off, the guy getting the teleport, which is usually me. So if I need a teleport, I go to where they're going to meet me at. So I go to the Druid Ring or the Wizard Spire. So I run there first and then I ask for a teleport. Or I find out where they're going to be and I'm like, listen, I'll get there and then I'll tell you when I'm there. Then you port to me, hit me with my translocate or with your translocate or your teleport, whatever you need to do to get me there. And you're talking 10 plat a minute, and it takes longer to set up the teleports than it does to do the teleports. It takes about a minute to 2 minutes to do a teleport. That's it. And if you can just sit in somewhere like East Commons, because East Commons tunnels is where we do most of our trading. We kind of treat it like an auction zone. You just sit at the front of the tunnel and you advertise you're doing teleports from East Common tunnels, and people will run up to you and ask for translocates, each one of them giving you 10 plat. You can knock those up. Those take less than a minute. You just have to memorize a spell, which takes less than 10 seconds, stand up, cast it, and you can. I've made doing that on my wizard, and I got bored. I get bored after about 20 minutes, but in those 20 minutes, I've made hundreds of plat, sometimes thousands of plat if people are feeling particularly generous, just sitting there and teleporting people during high volume time periods when I didn't feel like leveling. But I almost always feel like leveling. So that's not a big turn on. That's not a big, positive for me. I'm usually more than happy to pay 10 plat and get a teleport. Some people are like, no, you got to pay 100 plat. As somebody who mained a wizard more than once, I'll tell you right now, 10 plat is a decent tip. I would appreciate. Most people will happily take that, unless I'm going up to the plains, which requires me to have 100 plat stone to take you up there, which is consumed. So it costs me almost 100 plat to get you up to the plains to begin with. Yeah, then you got to pay me for the stone. I'll go buy the stone, but you got to pay me for it. And then tip on top of that. That's when you get some really great tips. Wizards get amazing tips to take people to the plains. But we're talking about druids. What do druids do well? Everything. What do they do poorly? Melee damage. They're okay at it. They're not a melee focused class. They're a caster class. Again, they're generally good at everything. Do you want a druid to group with you? Yeah. Well, they're the third worst healer in the game. Clerics are the best healers, shamans are the second best healers, and druids come in a distant third. Fourth is paladins, but I've been in a group where a paladin was our main healer, and we were fine. If everybody else is pulling their weight, then the paladin can pull that off, but again, paladins are the fourth worst healers, druids are the third. Why are they the third? Because shamans get slows and druids don't. We'll get into that with shamans and enchanters. Druids are good at what they do. They're not great at anything. So when people are putting together an ideal group, they're generally thinking of something besides a druid. Druids have the second best damage shields in the game. Mages have the best. Druids have a good charm, but it only works on animals. So, yeah. Bards have the second best charm because they can charm anything. Enchanters have the best charm. It lasts quite a while. Many minutes, hopefully. Bards last about a minute, if I remember correctly. I can't remember. I already said that during Bards. And then you have necromancers who can charm undead, and you have druids who can charm animals. And charm animal suddenly makes you a very, very powerful and dangerous class. But it's not until Kunark that you get a little bit of magic resist that you can place on your pet to make them easier to charm. It's not a straight magic resist. But they are the fourth charm class. So again, they don't have a mez like the other three classes that charm, so it's harder for them to keep control of their pet when their pet breaks, but they can charm. They're an incredible utility spell, making them one of the best solo classes in the game. They're the fourth best solo class in the game. They can fear kite animals. They can reverse fear kite animals because they get fear animal, and they can snare. So they have the best snare in the game. That is what they are the best at. They get the best snare in the game, so they are kings of kiting. They can dot. So they pull with a dot. They hit it with a snare. They hit it with another dot as they're running. They can give themselves Spirit of Wolf, so they can outrace anything they're fighting. In an outdoor zone, they're amazing kiters. The bad guy chases them and can't hit them, and they're just incredible they're good at everything, making them incredible overall, but they're not the best at anything. They're never going to top the damage charts like certain other classes will. They're not a pure DPS class, but they're okay at it. If they Buse, my partner here on Blam Blam Truckers, calls Druids the best overall at everything class, and he's not wrong. Druids are the reason why Rangers end up becoming incredible. They don't start incredible, but they become incredible. So that was Druids. Next is Enchanters. So, no. Dark Elves can be Enchanters, Dwarves can't, Erudites can be Enchanters, Gnomes can be Enchanters, Half-Elves cannot, Halflings cannot, High Elves arguably make the best Enchanters. Humans, yes, humans can do almost anything, except for be Shaman in Classic. Ixar, no. Ogres, no. Troll, no. Vashir, no. Wood Elves, no. Froglocks, no. I don't play Froglocks. I don't stick around long enough to play a Froglop, mostly. And then Draken, yes. So, you're looking at 2 stats for Enchanters. Some say 3, because Stamina is the 3rd stat, and you're going to be taking a lot of hits. And you are going to be taking a lot of hits. This is my class, by the way, and I always make High Elf Enchanters. You're saying, why do I make High Elf Enchanters? Well, I'll tell you. As an Enchanter, your number 1 stat is Charisma. Charisma affects most of your crowd control abilities. Charm and Mez and Pacify. You also get Root. You get a little bit, and you get amazing stuns. Intelligence determines how much mana you get. Stamina, you're over 75 agility, check, you're good to go. Stamina is the next thing you want to put points into, but you're going to get that from gear. Intelligence determines your mana pool. You don't need a giant mana pool as an enchanter, believe it or not. You get, and Clarity, the Clarity line of spells, and the Clarity increases your mana regen. And frankly, with Clarity on, unless your group is terrible or your pet just keeps breaking on you, you're not going to run out of mana. It's very rare that an enchanter runs out of mana. It's not unheard of, but of all the casting classes, it's the one, and I played them all, it is the one that runs out of mana the least. You just don't have that much mana, that many things to waste your mana on. You could, especially if you're trying to do all the buffing and the charming and the slowing, then you can run out of mana. But that it's rare that anybody is silly enough to ask you to do all of that. Enchanters are lousy damage dealers and the best damage dealers. Oh, I should look at the other races while we're doing that. So, humans. Enchanters. If you look at the stats, it's intelligence and charisma. They're okay. They're not great. They're just okay. Probably the worst enchanters in the game. Until you get to gnomes. Charisma, it's okay. Intelligence, it's better than a high elf. But again, intelligence isn't your main stat. Charisma is where your resists are going to be. The higher your charisma is. So this is specifically for charmed pets. And we'll get into charmed pets. But pet can break charm if it has it does a check against magic resist, and it does a check against your charisma. And the second check is the charisma check, and it has to break both of those. It has to beat both of those checks to break charm. So your pets will stay pets longer the higher your charisma is. I've tested this. It's true. So you're looking at charisma. Erudite. I don't know why it doesn't stay on the same class. Intelligence, highest in the game. Charisma, it's okay. Dark Elf, Enchanter. Again, decent, better than a High Elf, but this is the key one. Enchanters, what can't they do? This could probably be an hour-long video in and of itself. Known for crowd control, they charm pets, so you actually take one of your enemies and make it into your an ally. Oh, I should probably actually have it on Enchanter for stats. You're the best mezzer in the game. You can keep things locked down. I call it putting it on pause. And they just sit there as long as nobody disturbs them by attacking them. They just sit there for the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 seconds that your mez lasts. If the mez hits, it will go that long. Mobs do not break mez, they break charm. And charm is your biggest weapon in this game for an enchanter. Without a charm pet, you are the lowest damage class in the game. With a charm pet, you're the highest damage class in Classic. Because it's not Verant anymore, it's Daybreak. They made changes to how charm pets worked. So while they were very powerful back in the day in Classic, they're ridiculously powerful in Classic now. But in later expansion, because they needed to balance them for later expansions and make them more powerful to keep them up with everybody else's power creep. Powers tend, as games go in time, you keep making your characters more and more powerful. Well, they had to do something for enchanters, and this is one of the two big ones that, when they did it, it affected Classic. And if you play live, nobody plays in the Classic zone, so who cares? But in a TLP, it changed the shape of how Classic Everquest plays. That is most of what you're going to be doing. You will also be buffing, but buffs only happen, they last about half an hour, 20 minutes, half an hour apiece. You are the kings of clarity. So you have the best mana regen buff in the game, clarity. You have some armor boosts, some AC boosts. You have and speed. You have the best speed boosts in the game. So the only three classes that can boost speed are enchanters, shaman, and bards. And like I told you, there's three ways to get haste. There's haste from an item, haste from a buff. That's what clerics are the best at, and then bard haste. And so clerics have the best bard haste attack speed boost in the game. You're going to want to keep that up on your main tank. You will probably not be asked to slow, which you have excellent slowing capacity, but you will be asked to keep that speed buff up on your melee and clarity buffs up on your casters. What else do they do? I can't tell you how powerful charm is. It is ridiculous. You become in Classic and Kunark, and I don't remember when, I think it starts tapering off in Planes of Power. You are one of the highest damage dealers in the game because of your charm pet. No spells you're actually casting to do damage, though you do have a few. You have a dot, and you have a direct damage, and you have your stuns. Oh, your stuns are fantastic. So when you're playing an enchanter, you want to have your color stun, which is an AoE place-based stun. So everything around you gets hit with this. And it does no damage, so it doesn't break mez. So you can use it around mezzed mobs if you have to. When your pet breaks charm, the first thing you do is you hit it with your color stun. So it's going to turn around and attack you as soon as it breaks charm. I'm telling you right now, enchanters take damage. It's another reason to make a high elf, because the high elf cultural armor that comes out in either Kunark or Velius, I forget which, has charisma on it and wisdom on it. And it's chainmail level. And it's not easy to make, and you need both an enchanter to enchant something, and you need to get a cleric or druid of Tunair to enchant, what does she do? Emeralds? Rubies? Sapphires? Emeralds, I think, for you. to attempt to make this armor, and it's not easy to make, and it's expensive, but it gives you the highest AC you can get in the game for whatever expansion it comes out in for a pure caster class, an int class, because it's elves wearing chainmail, and it's a pure caster class wearing chainmail level armor, and that is a lot. It'll really help your game. It may lower your stats some, it may improve some of your stats, but having even a few pieces of it increases your AC significantly, and that is something you want to take into consideration as an enchanter. The only pure melee class, except for maybe necromancer, pure int caster, or even that you want to take that into consideration with. Clerics and enchanters are concerned about their AC more than any other in caster class. Well, shaman too, now that I'm thinking about it. So, your pet breaks. You hit it with charm. Not charm. You hit it with a low level, your not low level, your highest level color stun. That color stun will actually keep it stunned long enough for you to get off your charm. Charms only take about 2 seconds to cast, sometimes less. So you're able to get what I highly recommend, you're able to get your charm off again just off the stun. What I highly recommend is you keep your lowest level mez up. So you hit it with the stun, and then just in case charm fizzles, you hit it with your lowest level mesmerization spell. Mesmerize, whatever it's called. That'll keep it on pause for about 12 seconds, 15 seconds. So while it's on pause, then you charm it again. You do whatever buffs you want to do to it, or debuffs, because you can also, they get the Tash line of debuffs, which debuff magic resist. Remember how I said there's 2 checks on a charm? There's the magic resist check, and then there's the charisma check. Everybody gets Tash to lower their magic resist. Also, the other reason to put it on stun is to get the mage or the shaman can cast the mallow line, which also has a magic resist debuff to it. So you put it on your lowest mez, so you stun it. You charm breaks. This is how it's going to go. Charm breaks. Boom. Charm breaks. Boom. Color stun. It's stunned. Lowest level mez. It's now sitting there for a good 10-20 seconds, whatever that stun is, whatever that mez is. And then you hit it with Tash, you hit it with charm again. If there's a shaman or a mage available, they hit it with the mallow line. Now it's got extra mana resisted, and magic. It's got extra magic resist on it. You're good to go. You hit it with charm. Even if it fizzles, you have enough time to cast charm 2 or 3 times. It's charmed again. You send it back into the fight. Yeah. Enchanters take a lot of work as far as the amount of stuff you can do and have to do, but it's usually decent periods of not doing anything, and then fully engaged, and then periods of doing almost nothing. That's an enchanter in a nutshell. No, this is me in a nutshell. Help, I'm in a nutshell. Mages. Basically all the same races. You're going to get used to the pure casters. The pure casters are, again, dark elves, erudites, gnomes, high elves, humans, and I believe that's it. Oh, Draken, I guess. Mage. Okay, this is probably the easiest or the second easiest int class to play. It's one of the easiest classes in the game to play. It is more about timing and patience than it is about knowing combinations to hit and high speed attacks and all that. Mages focus on summoning and direct damage. Yeah. You know how I said druids can do a little bit of everything? Mages can't. Mages do direct damage, and they summon. And they have the best damage shield in the game, and they have Mallow, but those aren't... You're just going to throw that on... You'll throw your damage shield on the tank, and you'll throw your Mallow on, mobs with high magic resist on them, or fire resist. I think Mallow covers fire resist too. And that debuffs them a little. But mostly you just sit, send in your pet, and the main key you're going to be hitting is the assist key. You're going to make that in a macro, assist/main, assist space main, and that'll assist whoever's assigned the main assist tag in the group. So that'll be your tank, and then you just you hit that little button, or you type it in /assist space main, and then that gives you whoever they're attacking. So you focus on whoever they're attacking, and you send in your pet. Once you send in your pet, you're already sitting down to meditate. So you're sitting there going, while your pet's killing it. And then when you get to about 90% mana, you wait for the mob to get down to about 70% health, and as long as you have enough mana, you stand up, cast one direct damage or nuke spell, and then you sit down. That's most of your gameplay. It's very rewarding. I know it doesn't sound like much, but it's very rewarding. Can mages do more? Yes. Come Kunark, you get called a hero, which means you can summon one of the members of your party in the same zone with you to your position. It consumes a small gem. I think they cost like 1 plat each. You summon items. Most of what you summon, you're just going to put on your pet. Come Lucklin, I believe it's Lucklin, you can summon armor for either a lobby, and it's all temporary. It goes away when you log out. You can summon weapons. Eventually you can summon armor. You can summon bags to use. The really nice stuff I like about mages is they summon trinkets that have effects on them. Like, you don't have to worry about not being a race that can't see anything or has low night vision, because you summon an item that has ultra vision on it. So it takes, when you just put that in that item, the cold stone, that can go in it's 5 AC. It can go on your neck. It can go in either one of your hands. It can go in your range slot, or it can go in your ammo slot. You just put it in one of those, and boom, you've got vision. You got to do a little bit of summoning. You can summon food. You can summon drink. You can summon throwing weapons. You can summon arrows. There's not a lot of call for that, but it's there. People will say, "Hey, can anyone summon me some arrows?" And you'll be like, "Sure," and you summon hundreds and hundreds of arrows and give them to them. And they're like, "You're the best." You're not the best, but you're very good. Thank you for being there. Mages do excellent damage. Their pets get a lot of the same things that make charm pets so useful are true about mage pets. They got a big damage upgrade in the later expansion, and it works retroactively on a TLP. Yeah, all charmed pets, but even these created pets, they all proc significantly more. And what a proc is, it stands for process. If you've got a weapon with a process on it, a combat spell that it casts, and you give it to your pet will then use that, and the proc will go off a lot. So when you're hunting in the hole, which in Classic, it probably won't be a big thing on Teak, but it's one of the highest level zones in Classic, one of the last places to level up to 50 at. You're fighting a lot of summoned stuff, and you get a sword. You can summon a sword that has an anti-summoned direct damage spell on it, a proc. So you give 2 of those to your pet. You summon up 2, you give Sword of Runes, I think it is. You give 2 to your pet, he dual wields them. He goes in and just starts slamming with his swords, and the swords start proccing about 2-3 times a minute, sometimes more than that. And you just do a ton of damage down against summoned creatures, mobs, because of that. But you can buy low level weapons that people have dropped, and you'll never see these weapons again. You're just using your in-game plat to help you out, and give them to your pet. Like, people like to give the pets 2 stun whips to keep their target stunned. It doesn't keep them stunned, but every little bit of combat it does stun them. So every little bit of combat, it's not like they're in stun lock, but every little bit of combat that the mob is not doing is less damage you're taking. So, and those stun whips aren't that hard to get. I think they drop. I forget what dungeon they drop in. If it's the Tentacle Whip, it drops in both Befallen and Unrest. But it might be dropping in, I don't know, something like, what's the one with the gnolls in it off of the South Karana there? I can remember they're like the Teshmal Knolls. Anyway, Split Paw. That's the name of the dungeon. So, yeah, that's the pets are very nice. You want the water pet, the water pet. So there's 4 different kinds of pets, one for each of the elements, the classical elements, the Aristotelian elements: water, air, fire, and earth. Earth has the most hit points. You'd think you'd want that as your pet. You don't. Fire gets an extra damage shield. You think you'd want that for your pet. You don't. Air has stuns. You think you'd want that for your pet. Once in a while. Um, Water casts a direct damage. It is the highest damage pet. Unless you're soloing, which you're okay at best. Um, as a mage, you're generally going to want your water pet out. It's just a nice, easy pet. It does the most damage. Use your water pet. They have one of the hardest epics, will come Kunark, but it has one of the best rewards. That your epic, unlike the others who all have weapons, the mage epic is a spell that summons one of the most powerful pets the most powerful pet in the early game. I don't know when you get a more powerful pet. It's might be Planes of Power. It might be whatever expansion comes after Planes of Power. But yeah, it's they're a fun class to play. It may not sound like they're a fun class to play, but they really are. I highly recommend the Erudites. It really doesn't matter what race you are. In general, it doesn't matter. Erudites, however, have by far the highest intelligence, decent stamina, though I usually take that out and get my agility up to 75. But they have very high intelligence. Their zone is right next to their starting city is next to Tox Forest. That's your newbie zone, and that has both a druid and an wizard teleport area in it. So both a ring and a spire. So it's not hard to get a port out from there if you need one. And Tox is one of the lowest level teleports in the game. The 3 lowest level teleports to port someone else are Tox, G-Fei, or Butcher Block, and North Karana in the center of Antonica. So they live right next to. They're one of the first lowest level to get a port away from their city. You don't need it that badly because as a pure caster, you're not a melee, so you can bind yourself anywhere in the world and gate there. And you get the gate spell like all other pure casters do. Not much more else to say about magicians. They're ridiculously high damage. They're one of the highest damage classes in the game. The damage is consistent. They're really easy to play. When people play multiple boxes, they play at least 4 of them are usually 3 to 4 of them. If they're playing up to 6 boxes, most of them are going to be mages. We call them mage groups. They're really obnoxious for us players who aren't just playing the game solo by playing 6 accounts at once. Not that you're allowed to do that on TLPs when they start. You're usually limited to 3 true boxes. But, people are people. They do what they want to do. If that's fun for you, then I can't say you're playing the game wrong. If we do a quick look, one of the nice things about Dark Elves is they get hide. So a Dark Elf mage is the only one that can hide. And by the way, in a TLP, turning invisible no longer gets rid of your pet. It just puts your pet on passive. But being able to hide to get away from bad guys, it's really not used that much. But when it comes in handy, boy, is it memorable. Again, not bad intelligence. I think it's Dark Elves and Gnomes have the second highest intelligence in the game. Yeah, they're at 133. Dark Elves are at 134. Erudites are banging around at 142. Then you've also got High Elves, who are the second lowest at 127. But High Elves have the advantage if they follow Tunair, a High Elf can wear that armor that comes with, I want to say, Velius, the crafted armor I was telling you about, the chainmail. That's nice, but you're not going to be taking a lot of damage as a mage, honestly. Your pet's going to be taking most of the damage. One other thing mages are fantastic at is farming lower level zones. So if you need to farm, like, say, the Gorge of King's Orb, so you can get pottery supplies, because the Muddites in the Gorge of King's Orb. I'm sorry, I find it funny that I remember all this stuff from 25 years ago. If you have Muddite, if they drop clay, so that clay is then used in pottery. Um, if you're looking to farm rusty weapons, so you can turn that into ore and use it for smithing, there's few better classes better at there are few classes better for farming than mages, because your pets heal incredibly fast out of combat. They do a ridiculous amount of damage, they can take a lot of hits, and water pets are immune to poisons if you're looking to, gather poisons. Just a nice, fun, all-around class. Humans can also be mages, and they have the lowest intelligence. Again, humans aren't bad at anything, but they're not great at too much. There are only 3 races in the game that can be monks. In Classic, there's only 1, humans. Then you have Ixar and Kunark, and then you have Froglocks. I don't know if Draken can. Oh, Draken can be too. You have Froglocks in Legacy of Yakisha, who can also be monks. The number 1 single most important stats for a monk, and there is only one, my friends, is strength. Honestly, if your agility is over 75, you're good to go. Um, you get more boost from your armor and uh, from your armor than anything else, than your agility. Dexterity is important because that's how fast you learn melee skills, but you use your melee skills all the time. This is the first melee class we're actually talking about. But you use your skills all the time, you're not going to be falling behind if you have a lower dex. Not that any of these races have low dexes, because we shouldn't really be covering the Froglocks. They're not in the time period we're talking about here. But humans, monk, if they, for some reason they thought agility was going to be the big thing. It's not. So you get rid of the agility, you drop it all into strength. Monks are a damage dealing class first and foremost. They are pullers second, until they're one of the best pulling classes in the game. Yeah, sorry about that. I lost my microphone for a second there. Uh, Monks are one of the best pulling classes in the game because of Feign Death. They can single pull, but Feign Death is about you knowing when to hit it more than um, a lot more. It's a lot more about knowing when to hit it than any particular stat. Uh, you are because of, again, just like we were talking about with Charm Pets, where they made a change for later expansions to keep things friendly there. That filtered back to TLPs. Well, they made a change to monks' unarmed damage, and an unarmed monk is now the highest non-pet class damage class in the game. Highest DPS in the game right here, the monk, the human monk in Classic. And again, if you look at Ixar, monk, even if you take all this out, they're not going to be as strong as humans. Now, eventually that's not going to matter, because you're going to be putting that chain. You're going to be getting items that will bring you up. They're 5 strength less. They don't do as much damage as human monks do. However, Ixar get an AC bonus, and they get a regen bonus. So, Ixar are just better monks. They don't do as much damage, but it's not by enough of a difference that it's 100 versus 95. That's not a world of difference there. And again, their dexterity is higher, so they're going to get their melee skills up faster. It's not that big of a difference, honestly. The big difference comes in the racial abilities. They also get forage, which is nice. It's wonderful for rangers, but we haven't gotten to rangers yet, and druids. But it's just all Ixar get forage, all wood elves get forage. It's nice to have, because Ixar are also hated all around the world, but monks are the premier DPS class in the game right now, and people waste their time making them pull. I started off as a main on a monk last year in Oakwind, and I loved it, but everybody was making me pull, and I don't mind pulling, but I don't want to do it every time I log in. When I feel like pulling, I don't mind pulling. And I don't even mind pulling half the time, but the other half of the time, I want to be doing damage or tanking or being in the group and fighting. Pulling is just, it gets boring for me very quickly. Um, Now, that's not true for everybody. It's probably not true for you. It might be true for you. I don't know. One of the nice things about this game is there's so many different classes that focus on different things. Maybe you like pulling. Maybe you love pulling, and that's all you want to do. If it is, play this class. People will always ask you to pull. Can a Shadow Knight or a Necromancer, who also get Feigned Death, be just as good of a puller as a Monk? Yes. If you have an Enchanter in a group, do you need a Monk to pull? No, the Enchanter is going to be doing most of that anyway. But Monks, because of Feigned Death, can single pull incredibly well, but it takes a while. It's not going to be your fastest EXP. Bards are going to be better at pulling. Rangers are going to be better at pulling. A Cleric who's not doing anything, he or she is going to be better at pulling. Okay? It's pulling in this game has turned from an art to how many mobs can I get into the group as fast as possible. Let the enchanter put them on pause, or the bard. Let the crowd control put them on pause, and we burn them down one by one, and then when we're done with that group, you go out and get another group. You want to bring about 3 or 4 at a time. That's the goal. Now, that is not always the goal. There's times where you want only one. You should be able to pull incredibly well in those situations, especially during raids or going after specific bosses for quests, especially your epic quest. Then you want somebody who can single pull. But in those situations, usually you're going to want somebody who can use the pacify or the lull line of spells. So, something to think about for players in general. As a monk yourself, you're going to be pulling. I'll tell you that right now. People will ask you to pull. You need to be good at it and expect to do a lot of it. You get Mend, which is a small heal. It allows you to solo, though. Solo more quickly. That's the other reason why you want to play an Ixar if you can, because your downtime is reduced because of the regen. Your downtime is reduced because you take less damage, because that AC bonus from having scales is significant. Ixar just make the best monks. Excuse me a second. Got a bit of a hiccup. But again, damage class. Incredible damage class. What a Feigned Death pull looks like, and the reason why it takes so much time is you've got like a mob of like three mobs are sticking together in a group. You throw your spear or axe at them. And you get an AC bonus if you can keep your weight under 14 pounds, stone, whatever you want to call it, 14 units. So you're not going to be carrying a lot of gear. You want very light gear. It's something to take into consideration as a monk, because that AC bonus you get is significant. So you pull them by throwing something at them. So you hit one guy, he comes at you, his buddies see he got attacked, and they come with him. Pretty standard. You run back. Hopefully you have a Spirit of Wolf on you. You run all the way back, because you don't have any magical spells to snare them or anything like that. You run all the way back to your group. You don't just run into the group, though, if you're doing a single pull. You get outside of melee range at the very edge of ranged damage for whoever your tank is. And you wait for the mobs to come to you, and right before they hit you, if you do this perfectly, you feign death. You actually want to come, and if you can, get around a corner so they can't target you for spells. Then as soon as one of them gets around the corner, you drop to the ground, you flop, you feign death, whatever you want to call it. And the 3 mobs will now mill around you for a bit. And the one that you actually hit with the weapon has... now they think you're dead. They're just kind of waiting for a second there, trying to figure stuff out. The other 2 will walk away first. The one you hit with a weapon, that you tagged with a weapon, will actually stick around a little bit longer. When the other 2 walk off, once they get far enough away that they're, and you got to judge this by practice, once they get far enough away that they're not going to re-aggro, the one that's still standing over you, or when he just finally starts to walk away, that's when you stand up. Now the other way to do this perfectly, your tank has to be in on this. So when the other 2 walk away, and they're outside of aggro range again, which isn't very far, once they're outside of aggro range, the tank will now hit that one with an arrow. And then that one mob will now come in while the other two are outside of aggro range. So even though their buddy got attacked, they don't care. They're too far away now. They didn't see it. So they keep walking back. You still have to sit there in feign death mode waiting until they get far enough away. Then you stand up and join the fight. The problem with that is your DPS is insane right now. You should be in that fight from the very beginning. When you get aggro in a fight, you feign death, it'll drop you to the bottom of the aggro list, you stand back up, and you keep fighting. You're great at corpse recoveries. When you go through a wipe and the whole group dies, you probably won't because you feign death. So you can stand up and you can grab a couple of corpses with /corpse drag. You target the corpse and type in /corpse drag, or you set up a hotkey. Then you stand up, you walk the corpses back to a safe area, and when the cleric gets there, he'll res them all. Yeah, that's what monks do. Monks are awesome. Very fun class. If I didn't have to pull all the time, I would probably still be playing one. I really rather enjoyed being a DPS. I did not enjoy pulling all the time. I enjoyed pulling some of the time, but not all the time. It's boring. You just do it over and over again, and I didn't get to be in the fights as much as I wanted to be. Again, highly recommended classes. I know a lot of people who love playing monks. I just like playing monks. I don't love it. And if you're going to be spending as much time in this game as you tend to spend, you want to find something you actually love. Speaking of classes I didn't love, but lots of people do, is the Necromancer. For races, you have Ixar, which are the absolute best, even though they have the lowest intelligence. Humans, Necromancer, good intelligence. Again, they're not bad at anything. They're not great at anything, but they're not bad at anything. Then you have Gnome Necromancers, High Elf Erudite Necromancers, which have the highest intelligence, and Dark Elf Necromancers, which are the classic choice. So why, even though they have such low intelligence, are Ixar the best? Because of regen. Necromancers get a line of spells where they trade health for mana. And the regen of an Ixar negates that health drain. So if you're standing up, it's even. If you're sitting down, you actually have a little bit of health regen left over, especially once you hit 60, which is in Kunark. But your regen is better than the health drain for the Dark Pack. I think it's Dark Pack line of spells. So intelligence, the main thing intelligence does is it gives you more mana. It's the size of your mana pool. It also determines whether or not you fizzle with the spell. But once you're over 110 or whatever it is, 100, whatever it is, it has less of an impact. So it's really the size of your mana pool that intelligence impacts. So you want a really high intelligence for mages and wizards, because the bigger their mana pool, the more nukes they can drop. Well, you're not worried about that as a necromancer. You're getting that regen all the time from Dark Pact. So that's why Ixar make the best necromancers. Necromancers can do a little bit of everything, but mostly for themselves. They have tons of utility abilities. They get a res, though you have to use a Essence Emerald or whatever it is, Essence Stone, whatever it's called, to pull off a 90% res. 90% res is the second best res in Classic. They're the third class to get a res. It's Clerics, who get the best res in the game. Paladins, who get like a 93% res in Kunark, I think, something like that. And then Necromancers, who get their 90% res. It's nice to be able to do it. They get some of the best dots in the game. There is an ongoing debate as to who's the better damage over time caster. Damage over time is dot. Is it a Necromancer or is it a Shaman? I'll let them argue it out. I don't care. They're both fantastic at it. They get a Root. They're the Kings of Fear. They get the best fear. They get the same fear line everybody else gets, but they get it a little bit earlier than everyone else. They're the Kings of Fear kiting. So they fear you. They hit you with their snare line, which is called the Darkness, Engulfing Darkness line. And that is a dot as well as a snare. So it does a little bit of damage, and I talked about it with the Dark Elf Cleric. It does a little bit of damage. It does a little bit of snare. It does a decent amount of snare, so it slows them down physically, like walking speed. And then you hit them with fear, so they're running away from you slowly, and then you just sit there. You maybe drop another dot on them, and they are the second best pet class before Lucklin. Their skeleton pets are fantastic. They're not as good as mage pets, but they're everything I've said about mage pets. They're number two at that. They can they have ridiculous proccing ability. They do damage. They can take damage for you. And basically, Necros tend to treat them as another dot. Or one of my favorite things to do when I played a Necro when I was soloing, and they're the premier solo class in the game. If I had enough room, I would hit darkness on a mob. Yeah, I couldn't remember the word mob. So I'd hit darkness on a mob. It would start coming to me. I'd throw a fear on it and my pet on it, and let that one run around. And as the pet was killing that, I'd grab another mob with my darkness line. It would come to me. I'd hit it with another dot. So now I've got two dots on it, and you've got like 4 lines of dot spells, 3 or 4 lines of dot spells. And then while they're coming to me, I'd hit it with the fear. Then he'd run around. I'd have 2 or 3 mobs running around, and I wasn't great at this. I was good at this. Other people are fantastic at this. I'm just good at it. I worked at it. I didn't like it. I didn't not like it. It was just, this is okay. I like doing other stuff better. I like grouping in this game. I like grouping a lot. Solo play in Everquest doesn't appeal to me much unless I'm farming, and then that's just something to kill time while I'm waiting for a group. Um, so yeah, you just pull and you get 2 or 3. You juggle 2 or 3. At one point, I juggled 5 mobs at once, and I ran out of mana, believe it or not. And yeah, it was fun. You got a lot of odd utility abilities. You can share your mana with another target, another player. So it's called twitching because you kind of look like you're twitching when you're doing it. Um, so you can twitch mana to people. Oh, that's another thing mages can do. Mages are better at this. They come Kunark, they can summon mod rods. Mages can, not necros. And a mod rod trades a certain amount of health for a certain amount of mana. And you, as a mage, you can just lay them on the ground for people in your raid or your group to pick up and use. Anyway, back to necros. So you can twitch mana to people. You can steal health from from enemies. So you can't heal yourself, but you can steal their health and use that to heal yourself. So for everyone besides Ixar, when you're running something like the Dark Pact, so you're getting that mana increase that's coming to you, you have to balance that out with the occasional. There's 2 lines of health stealing. There's a dot that you just put on them and you just keep getting health from them while they keep taking damage. And then your direct damage line of spells, which is almost irresistible, which is useful against mobs that resist magic attacks. Your direct damage line of spells does health stealing. It's vampiric whatever. Um, yeah, Necros are very versatile. It's a fun class to play. You can solo with it. You can group with it. Generally, you don't want to use your dots in groups because it's a waste of mana. You're using a lot more mana to do damage if the dot doesn't go its full length. If you're lucky in a fight, your dot will go half length. In raid encounters, you want both shaman and necros there to dot the big bosses because they have so much health regen that puts a big dent in their health regen and might even do some actual damage to them, like lowering their health bar. You got to deal with you got to deal with that regen somehow, either by doing so much damage per second that they just go down in health. They do a little bit of spike damage. They do a lot of damage over time. Again, fear, snare, root. They get root at like 34, so they can root rot. And we haven't talked about root rotting yet because, well, druids can do it, shaman can do it, and necros can do it. And what root rot means is you root them so the mob can't move. So you do this on a melee mob. You root them so they stay in place. You just walk away from them. You drop a bunch of dots on them, 2, 3, whatever, and that just lets them rot away. So you can park mobs. I know necros who would root rot like 4 or 5 mobs at once, and they'd have their pet on one of those mobs that they're root rotting. It can be a very fun class to play. I don't know. It wasn't for me. I kept finding myself, and they get a mez. They get like an 18-second mez called Screaming Terror. So when they're charming undead, and they can only charm undead, and they've got an undead pet charmed, that brings them into high damage territory now in a group. So why not have a Necro? They can do that. So when the Mez breaks, they can hit it with Screaming Terror, and that's 18 seconds of mesmerization. They can get their charm back up on the pet and send it back into the fight. They they're good pocket enchanters. They do a little bit of everything, less than a druid does. Druids do a lot of everything in comparison to a necro. Um, yeah, fun class to play. What is the next class? Paladins. Very few. Let's see. Ironically, barbarians cannot be paladins. Dark elves, no. Dwarves, yes. Dwarves are the best paladins in the game. Erudites, yes. Gnomes. Eventually, gnomes can be paladins and shadow knights, but not in classic, if I remember correctly. Half elves, yes. Halflings, yes, yes. Not at classic. They can't be rangers at classic either. High elf, yes. This is arguably the most popular paladin race because they're pretty and they have high wisdom. Um, humans can do everything except for be shaman. And let's see, wood elves, no. Bashir, no. Draken probably can. Yeah. No, 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 no. Yes, yes. Eventually froglocks when they come into the game. But again, we're not playing with them. So why do you want to be a dwarf paladin? Because your number one stat is strength, and they have the highest strength of any race that can be a paladin. Your number two stat is stamina, and they have the highest stamina of any race that can be a paladin. Your number three stat is wisdom, and they have the second highest wisdom of any race that can be a paladin. You want to get your agility up to 75, but that's true of every. I've said that for everything. Why are high elves the number one choice? Because they're pretty, and aesthetics means a lot. Also, they have the highest wisdom of any paladin class by far. Um, dwarves are number two at 88, and high elves are number one at 100. Wisdom is not easy to get in Classic or Kunark for Paladin gear. It's not super hard, but it's not easy. It's about moderate. And that's on Wizard. Okay, so why you want to be a dwarf? I just told you all the stats. Are any racials taken into consideration here? Nope. Uh, it's humans, erudites. I guess the fact that erudites and humans can't see that well in the dark. Half elves, dwarves, and um, high elves. None of them have a ton of racials. Dwarves, high elves, and half elves all have um, decent night vision, but that's about it. It comes down to stats, in my opinion, and dwarves just have the best stats for it. What do paladins do? They are warriors who also they're tanks. They're a tanking class, but they're a mix between warriors and clerics. They can take a lot of damage. They get the cleric lines of healing spells. Cleric lines of healing spells are awesome, but they're the fourth best healers in the game after clerics, shamans, druids, and paladins in that order. They're, they have the second best resurrections in the game, making them better than necros, but worse than clerics. And yeah, they're very useful. They get eventually they get stuns. I don't know when they get their stuns. It's not as early as I thought, and that's how they hold aggros by hitting their enemies with stuns. Um, what else can I tell you about paladins? They get the lull line of spells, the pacify line of spells, so they're good pullers. They're very good pullers. Not that many people play them that way. They can use bows and arrows to pull for ranged attacks. They're not great at it. Um, they tend to use a shield and a sword, or sword and board as we call it. Or they tend to use a two-handed weapon. They'll do a lot more damage with a two-handed weapon. They cannot dual wield like rangers, warriors, rogues, and monks can. Um, if Any of this sounds appealing to you? Good. They make great main tanks in groups. They're not great main tanks. Only warriors are great main tanks for raids. If you want to tank in a raid, you want to play a warrior. If you want to off tank, you want to play a shadow knight or a paladin, or a, you know, you can even off tank with a warrior. But they're amazing main tanks, and it's not a very fun class to play compared to other classes. There's a lot less utility with a warrior. Paladins have a decent amount of utility. Again, they get roots, they get stuns eventually, they get some blindness. They get the Yelp line, which is a cleric line that increases your strength considerably. They get an invulnerability, temporary invulnerability that's useful for not taking any damage. They get a special ability that only paladins get called Lay on Hands, which heals them completely once per 20 minutes or so, or 30 minutes, whatever it is. Um, they're a good group tank. They're not great. They're just good. They don't have the same kind of utility that a ranger or a shadow knight has, but they have a lot more than a warrior. They're useful in a group. They can hold aggro okay, with more than just the taunt ability. They get the shield bash skill, and if they have a shield equipped, they can stun the enemy with bash. Yeah, if you get your two-hander equipped, you don't get that. I don't know what else to tell you. Um, Buse mained a paladin when he was playing on Mangler for like 4 years, 3 years, whatever it was. He loved it. He's got a lot more to say about it. Um, they really come into their own in later expansions. They're not that great. Not that they're bad. They're fun to play. They get an incredible line of items that are paladin only. Probably the most useful, though not the most powerful of which, is the Ghoulbane, which you can get around level 35, 40. I think it drops. Or I think you can quest for it too. And that actually has a Dismiss Undead as a proc on a sword. It's a one-handed sword with Dismiss Undead. So you can sword and board with and if you're fighting undead, they're excellent against undead. They get the cleric's line of, they get the spells later on. So if a cleric gets a spell at level 1, they'll get it at like level 5. But they get the that Dismiss Undead on a weapon is just fantastic. And generally you proc once per minute. If you can get your dexterity up to 200, which is not easy to do, you'll proc twice a minute. Frankly, I don't think it's worth it. Just let the dex add up as it will. You don't get critical hits as a paladin at all. And yeah, I don't have that much more to say about them. I like them. I don't really play one much anymore. I played one before. Got it up to like 40, 50. Maybe it was only, I think it was 40. It was fine. It did everything it said it would do, and it just wasn't for me. It was for Buse. Buse loves paladins. Of course, he's just like, I went human. I should have gone high elf. I'm like, why? He's like, wisdom's hard to get. I'm like, yeah, but strength. All of your damage is based off of strength. Why don't you want to max out strength? Well, I'm not trying to do damage. I'm trying to take hits. Yeah, but stamina's on everything. You're going to max out stamina eventually anyway. I would focus on strength if I was making a character, or put some into wisdom or something. You only got 20 points to play with instead of 25 or 30. Hybrids only get 20 points to play with. See, 20. So you drop that into strength as a dwarf. You're at 120 strength. You're going to be cranking through the levels, and then when you're high enough level that you're worried more about wisdom and stamina, yeah, you've got gear that'll start doing those things. I don't know. To each their own. And this game is the epitome of to each their own. Yeah, Paladin is a fun class. Ranger! Let's see. Ranger is one of the most race-restricted classes in the game. It is only half-elves, humans, and wood elves who can do it in Classic. I believe come Lucklin or Plains of Power. I think it's Lucklin. Halflings can also be rangers. Halflings have the best stats for rangers in the game. Why is that? Well, if you're looking to play in later expansions, you want a very, very high dex. If you're looking to play in current like Luckland and Plains of Power when you start getting alternate advancement points. And Classic, you want very, very high strength. And as far as Rangers go, and you also want good wisdom for your spell mana pool. So as far as Rangers go, if you take all the points out, you'll see that Halflings have the best, but you can't make one in Classic, unfortunately. Maybe they'll change that one of these TLPs, because I would love to play a Halfling Ranger. Ranger is actually the class I'm pretty sure I'm going for. I played one, goofed around on live with it after I made those videos with the Cleric, and man, I just love everything they do. Worst of the 4 tanking classes, which are Warrior, Shadow Knight, in order of effectiveness, Warrior, Shadow Knight, which are kind of even, Paladin, those 3 are great at it. Then you got a Ranger. Rangers cannot wear plate armor, meaning they're always going to have lower armor class, AC, than the other tanks. Okay? They can't. The other 3 tanks can all wear plate. Rangers just aren't. They can hold aggro better than the other classes. They can keep the mob focused on them better because they have better direct damage spells, and specifically the spell there that you need a Fire Beetle Eye. You gotta have a Fire Beetle Eye in your inventory to cast there. It's dot. They do dots. It's just like druids. They do damage over time spells. They do DDs. They do direct damage spells. They do roots. They do snares. They can't teleport, but beyond that, they get most of the Ranger's line of spells. They get a damage increase spell called Fire Fist, which increases your attack, which increases both. If I remember correctly, it increases your range. It definitely increases your melee damage. They get all the same melee bonuses warriors get as far as damage goes, except they can't melee crit. They can crit with ranged attacks, with bow attacks. They can do that from level 1 now because of changes they made later in the game that came in interactively. That wasn't the case in Classic. It is the case on a TLP. They have, if you can get the right bow, your range damage is considerable. It's not as good as your melee damage, but it is considerable, which helps you with soloing. Rangers are great solo classes because not only do they get harmony, which allows them to lull groups, which is it's only Rangers and Druids who can lull entire groups with harmony, but it can only be used outdoors, so you can't do it inside a dungeon. Outdoors, they can fear kite. Not fear kite. They can fear kite animals. They can straight up kite animals by running backwards and shooting them with their bow and arrow while they've got the bad guy snared. And it's a lot faster than you think with a good bow. And good bows aren't that hard to find. You can technically do the true shot bow, which is the 3rd best bow in Classic is the true shot. I'm sorry, the 4th best bow in Classic is the true shot bow, which you can technically do at level 8. You can't really do it at level 8. It's not practical unless you're a twink, in which case somebody's going to be giving you a great bow anyway. So Bow of the Underfoot is the best bow in Classic. Raincaller, which is the upgraded true shot bow, which you need to do the true shot bow quest to get, is the 2nd best bow in Classic because the true shot bow has decent stat. I'm sorry, Raincaller has decent stats on it. True Shot doesn't. Usually you got to be. I'll finish up on True Shot. The Runed Oak bow is the 3rd best bow in Classic, which drops off of a level 20 mob in South Karana, which has the 2nd best ratio after the Bow of the Underfoot, but it doesn't have any stats on it, which is why I tend to put Raincaller a little bit higher up. And Bow of the Underfoot drops off of level high 40s, low, and sometimes into the 50 mobs in the hole. The Raincaller bow you get through a quest after you've done the True Caller bow, which is also a quest, and an archery combine. So the True Caller, the True Shot and the Raincaller bow both have the same ratio for damage on it. I know I'm getting into the weeds here. So, the True Shot bow is probably the first bow you're going to get. That's a great bow. But it's only that if you get your fletching up, because there is a fletching combine that is a 235 trivial to get the True Shot bow. That 200 is the highest you can get in fletching in Classic. So there's a chance to fail, there's a decent chance to fail even if you've maxed out fletching. If you can get your fletching up to 150, which isn't that hard to do, by level 8 to 10 or so, you can probably make yourself a True Shot bow. It'll probably just take... There's no, there's only a few kills involved in the True Shot Bow quest, and they're all level 9 mobs at the highest, level 3 to 9, to get the micro servo that you need, or whatever it is, mecha servo, micro servo you need to get for the quest. It's not hard to do. So if you're level 10, you can definitely do this quest. Um, if you don't feel like doing it and spending all that money on fletching to max fletching out, and P99 has the best guide for maxing out fletching. It's not that hard to do. It's going to cost you about 100 plat. Probably can't do that at level 10. You probably won't have that much plat. But it's not that hard to get max level fletching in Classic, or at least get within the 150 range so you can take a decent shot at making a true shot bow. You probably have like a 10% chance to make it, so it's going to take you about 10 combines, roughly. It might take you one combine. You know, if you've got a 90% chance, 10% chance of failure, then one shot is all you need. Maybe. It might take you 10 shots. You should have it by 10. You probably have it before that. So yeah, if you've got a bow like one of those 4 bows I just mentioned in Classic, then a Ranger actually does decent damage. And based on your dex, you get crits off of that. This is the only class I'll ever recommend worrying about your dex for, period. Because for every other class, the only thing dex does is it technically can improve your proc rate, but it's not worth 2 procs per minute versus 1 proc per minute is generally not worth worrying about your dex. By the time you're out of Velius, you're going to be close to max dexterity, if not at max dexterity anyway, and it's going to be a pain to get it up before that, to max it out before that. It's not worth worrying about. Take it if it comes on the gear, be happy for it, but the only other thing dex does for you is increases the rate at which you improve your combat skills, which is nice. I'm not saying it's not nice. I'm just saying it's not necessary for your game. It's not something to be worried about as a player. Rangers are, oh yeah. So again, snare something. If you've got a decent one of those bows I just mentioned, one of those 4 bows I just mentioned, you'll probably end up getting the ruined oak bow. It's not that hard to get. He's a decently camped mob, but only by Rangers, because he doesn't drop anything any other class wants, and Rangers don't get played very much. Rangers have a stigma to them. Back in Classic, they were probably the worst class to play. And most of the things that made them the worst class to play are now gone, thanks to changes they made in the game over the years. So now they're all those bad stigma to it. It's not there anymore. They're a lot of fun, in my opinion, which is why I'm probably going to main one for the first time ever. I've leveled like 3 Rangers to 50, and I never mained one, and I really want to main one. What else can I tell you about Rangers? They do a little bit of everything. They get Druid spells, a few, just like Paladins get Cleric spells a few levels later. Rangers get Druid spells. They auto fire is a new feature. You type in /auto fire, and you will automatically fire your bow at the target. You make that into a macro, which is very easy to do, and you put that on your I want to call it a board. That's not right. Your hotkeys. You match it up so if you get 10 of them, 12 of them, so 1 through plus on your keyboard at the top there above QWERTY, you can assign tasks, the hotkeys to those, and then when you press one of those, you do that thing. So with Rangers, it's auto. What did I say? Auto shot, auto attack. It's not auto attack. Auto fire. It's /auto fire. Type in /auto fire, or you make the macro for it, and you will just start firing automatically, just like auto attack does. But instead of melee, it's for ranged attacks, auto fire. So you just keep firing your bow. Arrows are very cheap to make through fletching. Come Kunark, you can pick up a wrist piece that has a right-click summon arrows. You can get arrows from the mage. You can make arrows that actually increase the amount of damage or the amount of range you have. Rangers will eventually become actually it's not even eventually. If you get the bow with the underfoot that has a 200-foot range on it, and you get an arrow that has a 50-foot range on it, already at 200, you're past the max range of any caster. So you can outrange casters and keep just hitting them from halfway across the zone. It gets ridiculous how much range there actually is in Ranger. The nice thing about that is when you are running around a zone and you've got something snared and you're hitting it with arrows, and you've got sow on, because at 28 you get sow, or sow, so you're just outrunning them, outpacing them anyway. You just walk backwards and shoot them. It's fun. You can cast some spells. If you really want to, you can get in melee with them, and you do a ridiculous amount of damage in melee. Um, so I didn't talk about this with the paladin, but again, it's a later change that comes back, and it's brought into the game to help out warriors more than anyone else. So TLPs have melee augs. Augs generally don't come in augmentations. Augs generally don't come into the game until um, Lost Dungeons of Norath, which is sometime after Plains of Power. Might be the next expansion, might be 3 away. Who knows? Somebody else, that's who. Um, and so you can buy these from a vendor, and there's a vendor in every major city, and you put them into your weapons, and it adds a proc to your weapon. So if you have a weapon with a proc, now you have 2 procs. So the ranged weapon procs don't come in, but the reason why they come into the game is because Wolfenite, or however it's pronounced or spelt, has a taunting component to it, a stun and a taunt to it. And warriors need a lot of help holding aggro, and they get a lot of that from their procs. So they need that Wolfenite as they level to keep the mob's attention. Also, there's a couple healing procs. So there's 1 damage over time proc, 1 direct damage proc, 1 healing proc, and 1 healing over time proc on each. You can buy 1 of each, and you can only put 1 on a weapon at a time, and you can remove them. They're no drop, which doesn't matter on Teak, but it matters on other servers. So, yeah, as a ranger, you can actually put those items into your weapons. You get access to some of the best ratio weapons in the game as far as damage goes, and you get the same skill maximum skills as warriors when it comes to offensive combat. Paladins and Shadow Knights get the same defensive maximum to skills that warriors get, making them better tanks, but they don't do as much damage. Warriors and Rangers do roughly the same amount of melee damage, and Rangers on top of that can cast offensive spells. They are one of the they're the 3rd highest melee damage class in the game. It goes Monk, Rogue, Ranger. And I've seen Rangers top out Monks in the damage charts. I've seen them top out Rogues in the damage chart. It depends on the player more than the class, but you should know which classes do what. Anyway, that's enough pitching for Rogues. For Rangers. Next is Rogues. Oh, you can't even play a halfling in the to start the TLP. You can play either a half elf ranger. Notice how it's 75 strength before adjustments and 65 wisdom. You want decent wisdom for a decent mana pool. You can play a human ranger, 80 strength before you reassign your points, and wisdom, 80 wisdom. Or you can play a wood elf, which has, as a ranger, 70 strength, which is not that high, and 85 wisdom. Me, I go with the wood elf because of the racials and the location of Kelethan versus Quanos. Yeah. Being able to forage from the beginning isn't that great, but hide is surprisingly useful for pulling. And you're probably wondering why hide is important for pulling, and I'll tell you. Now, I was going to talk about this with rogues because I just found out about this. This is new on me. But if you are pulling with a missile weapon, whether it's an arrow or a thrown weapon, and there's a group of mobs, if you throw the weapon at them and then immediately turn invisible somehow, when the weapon hits, if there's a group of mobs, if there's like 4 of them there, 5 of them, whatever, and the weapon hits one of them, and all the mobs will then check to see if there's anything in the area. So you immediately, as soon as you hit attack, not auto fire, just melee ranged attack, not melee. As soon as you hit ranged attack, you then immediately hit hide. And if it works, and you cap out hide at 75 for a ranger. For a rogue, you cap it out at over 200. So it always works with rogues, almost. It usually works with rangers. As soon as that missile is released from you, it takes time to get to the target. If you're invisible by the time it hits the target, he'll say, "Hey, something hit me." This is not exactly how it goes. This is not how the code works. This is basically what the scenario looks like. He goes, "Hey, something hit me." He turns around and starts running in the direction of where he got hit from. His friends look around. They don't see anything, so they don't aggro. It is the fastest and most efficient way to single pull. We tested it with a rogue. Um, it really does work. I've been playing this game for 25 years, and I just found out about this. On and off, mostly off. But I played it back in the day. I came back 5, 6 years ago, and I had no idea that this worked, and it's brilliant. So you do a single ranged attack. It hits the guy. He starts coming to you, and only he starts coming to you because it's single range attack, hide, missile hits. He's the only one who comes to investigate, and then as soon as you move, um, the others could possibly see you. So you want to wait till he's right up on you, and then you move. As soon as you move, you'll break hide. As soon as you break hide, rogues can hide sneak, so they can at that point start moving a little bit, but rangers can't. So as soon as you break hide, he will see you. If the other guys are still in aggro range, not range, but in range of his aggro, they'll come to assist their friends. So be far enough away that they're not in range. And then you've only pulled one. It's fast, it's efficient, and it works. And it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It allows rogues to pull with a decent throwing weapon or a ranged weapon or a bow and arrow with enough range to it. So we'll talk about that more with the rogue, but I wanted to mention it with the rangers because rangers get hide, max out your hide skill, and you too, and wood elves can get that. Wood elves have the best starting area as far as the three choices you have in classic for rangers. That kind of matters if you can't get a teleport. It means you can get to Velius and Kunark later when those expansions come out a whole lot faster. Because the boat to Kunark is off Caladim, which is the next zone over from Greater Fadark, which is where Wood Elves start. The boat to Velius is off of, what is that, Northern Row, Southern Row, which is a 10-minute run from Freeport. Freeport is across the ocean from Caladim, and in TLPs, you can use translocators to cross the Ocean of Tears. It takes less than a minute, including loading time, to get from the translocator in Caladim to the translocator in East Freeport. And then from East Freeport, it's a straight run down to Northern Desert of Roe and then Southern Desert of Roe. And I think it's in the Northern Desert of Roe, actually, that the boat to Velius is. Well, the raft, the translocator, actually. So now you're translocating down to Velius. It's very fast to go from the three best starting cities for transport are Freeport, which is the best, Caladim, which is the second best, and Kelethin, which is the third best. And Wood Elves start in Kelethin. The stats aren't all that different. I can make up the what do you call it there? The strength difference eventually. I'm not that worried about it. Dexterity is better, though I would put all my points into strength probably for a Wood Elf Ranger. And the wisdom's better. I might cap my wisdom. Well, it's at 85. I might cap that up to 90 and put this at 85. Let's see what I'm talking about here. Take them all out of dex. So if I drop it all into strength, it'll give me 90 strength and 95 wisdom. And 85 wisdom. That's not bad. And a high dex of 80. I'm telling you right now, halflings make the best rangers as far as starting stats go. By the time you make a half-elf, then the end game is at the point... I'm sorry, halflings make the best. By the time you make a halfling ranger, the stats are already to the point at end game where you don't have to worry about it anyway. Which is annoying. I would love to start off as a halfling rogue. By the time halflings come along, I don't... not rogue, halfling ranger. By the time halflings come into the game, I'm not worried about swapping over to one anymore. Also, Wood Elves can wear medium and small armor. Humans can only wear medium armor. And then you got the whole night vision thing, which is annoying, but not impossible to get over. All right, next is rogues. Lots of people can play rogues. Barbarians can play rogues. Barbarians technically make the best rogues in the game. Rogues are concerned with one stat and one stat only, and that is strength. Your secondary stat, like everybody, like most people's, is stamina, but your main stat is strength. And people are like, what about dexterity? Dexterity is a major factoring in how much damage you do with throwing weapons and archery. Yes, it is. Eventually. Um, eventually come, Lucklin when you start getting advanced AAs, and Pop where you get even more alternate advancement points. Rangers become incredible. Dexterity becomes a major thing for them. It matters to bards. It does not matter to, um, what do you call it, rogues. I would, however, as a rogue, which is not what that class is. That's warrior, right? Yeah. I would take points. Yeah, that's perfect. That's just perfect. Uh, Everything goes into strength. You are a melee class. Your strength is determined off your strength. Your damage is determined off your strength and your weapon. You want a great piercer and a nice offhand. You are a two-weapon, you're a dual-wielding class, and you are back in Classic on Live, back when Everquest first came out. Rogues were the highest damage-dealing class in the game, bar none. They were the kings of damage. Wizards came in, wizards and mages came in somewhere after that. Um, Nobody else was in a rogues class when it came to sheer damage. And it's not the case anymore. In Classic on a TLP, rogues are your second best melee damage dealer after monks. There are, depending on how you're skilled, depending on how you're geared, and how skillful you are as a player, rogues could top the damage chart. I've seen them do it. I've seen them do it a lot. With the changes to pets, mages, and other pet classes like enchanters often get way up on the damage chart with their pets, especially enchanters. But enchanters have to deal with a whole lot of other stuff, um, like charms breaking. Rogues just go in and do a ton of damage. Most of their damage comes not just from their melee weapons and their constant, auto attacks, but from their backstab, which is an ability they get at level 10. You have to physically be behind the mob, but it does an absurd amount of damage. An absurd amount of damage. Rogues can also steal. It's a skill called pickpocket. They're the only ones to get pickpocket in the game. Rogues are masters of picking locks. Lock picking is good. You never need a key to get into a dungeon. The only other class that gets lock picking is bards. They're not as good at it, but they're good enough. Rogues, however, are exceptionally good at it. And what combat looks like, and you get sneak and hide. You have the best invisibility in the game because rogues are not there. If you want to see somebody, they're always hiding behind something. That's the idea behind sneak hide, or hide sneak, depending on how you want to put it. But you actually click it as sneak and then hide, because you can hide when you're sneaking, but you can't sneak when you're hiding. What's the difference? Okay. Hide makes you invisible if you don't move. And rogues are the only class that can move while hiding if they're already sneaking when they hit hide. Sneak makes you lowers the awareness of mobs around you. So if you go behind somebody, when you can get really close to them when you're sneaking, if you go behind them, and other classes get sneak, rangers get sneak, monks get sneak. I'm not sure who else gets it, but rogues are the kings of sneak. And you sneak, and that means you can move close to somebody, closer than you could if you weren't sneaking, but they can still see you if you walk in front of them. If you're hiding while you're sneaking, then they can't see you. You become completely invisible. Now there's the only thing that can still see you are creatures that can see invis. They're the only ones who can still see you. And players who have sneak and viz on. Now the other thing, it does slow you down. No question about that. It slows you down. But you're completely invisible. Normally, undead creatures can see through invisibility, unless you have invisibility to undead. But if you're invisible to undead, you're visible to everything else. There is no way around that for a player to make themselves invisible. You can make someone else, theoretically, I don't know if this would even work. Like, enchanters get both an invisibility and invisibility to undead, but they can't cast them both on themselves. As soon as they start casting, they lose whatever invisibility it is. Rogues are the only class that can make themselves completely invisible to dead and undead. So, consider that. They're great at sneaking around. They're wonderful for corpse runs. They get double. They have a chance to crit while if they hit an enemy from behind with a thrown weapon. That whole pulling thing I was telling you about with Rangers, Rogues are even better at it because their hide gets up to 200 points of hide. Rangers only get it up to 75. And I forgot to talk about tracking. Oh, I'll get back to that in a minute. Actually, let's cover it now. Rangers, Bards, and Druids all get tracking. And tracking tells you it brings up a list, it brings up a window with a list on it, and anyone in that list you can click on and it'll guide you through text what direction they are to you. He's to your left, he's to your left, he's to your right, he's to in front of you and to the right, in front of you and to the left, and directly in front of you, and then you just keep running. Tracking's a great skill. Rangers are the best at it, Druids are the second best at it, Bards are the worst at it. If you're looking for a mob, you want to have a tracker with you. It's a lot easier. Anyway, back to Rogues. So Rogues, if you hit hide, and this only works for Rogues, if you're in combat and you turn off auto attack and you hit your hide button, it has a feature called evade, which is right in the programming. What happens is it lowers you by so many points on the aggro list, depending on how good your hide is. So if you do enough damage between your backstab, your augments on your weapon, your procs on your weapons, and your weapons themselves, if you do enough damage to an enemy to pull aggro off of the main tank and onto you, which is going to happen, you should have a macro set up, when they're very easy to set up. You should have a macro set up that basically says the first line will be / auto attack off. Next line is / do ability 1, which is usually pickpocket. / do ability 2, which is going to be hide, and then / turn auto attack on, and then you'll go back to auto attacking. Now evade, that button there, that's how I make my evade buttons. That one button there will not only save your butt, it also allows you to steal from the mob. You hit it, it just keeps you at the bottom, the very bottom of the aggro list. That way you never end up taking damage, because the warrior brings it in, you give him about 2-3 seconds to get, the monk or the puller. See, even I say it. I don't even like monks pulling, and I say monk instead of puller. The puller will bring the mob in, so he brings in the mob. The tank engages. Once the tank has aggro, you give him about a 2 to 3 second count. You jump in behind it, and you backstab. You open with backstab, and your backstab will turn on and you go into auto attack. And then, actually, I usually backstab, evade, auto attack. But evade turns my auto attack on. Did you notice that? Oh, the other line I'll put in there after pickpocket, like do ability pickpocket, is / auto inventory. And that'll put whatever I took from the pickpocketing directly into my inventory. You get 5 lines for a macro. It's very easy to do. Anyway, that evade, so I hit my backstab button, and then I hit evade, and I'm auto attacking automatically because the last line of there is auto attack on. And I'm behind the mob where I'm supposed to be, doing incredible damage, and it's a lot of fun to play. You will be near the top of the damage charts. You probably won't top them out, though you could. It's very possible to top them out, especially if your procs all go off. Very fun class to play, incredibly high damage. Hard to get groups because everybody's like, I'd rather have a monk. Monks do more damage anyway. They can do more damage. They don't necessarily do more damage. As far as races that can play them, barbarians have the highest strength. Dark elves. Oh, another thing. Bards and rogues can get masks of deception of different kinds that allow them to right-click and take the form of disguise themselves basically as another race. So the one in Classic is uh, the original Mask of Deception, which turns you into a Dark Elf. But you can also eventually, as the expansions go on, they keep adding more and more, and eventually, if you get all the masks, you can turn into any race, and then even some NPC races. It's pretty cool. Dark Elves, look at the strength here. 85. Nothing to write home about. Fun. If you're playing anything besides a barbarian or a dwarf as a rogue, you're doing it for flavor, except for maybe halflings who get a lot of nice starting abilities, or wood elves who get forage. Dwarf, second best strength, excellent dexterity, incredible stamina, just like a barbarian. Stamina there is 95. Stamina for a rogue here is just 90. And again, great starting area for travel. And rogues do not get any speed enhances whatsoever. Erudites cannot be rogues. Gnomes can be rogues. Again, nothing to write home about here. Who is this? Half-elves can be rogues. Halflings can be rogues, and they start with both sneak and hide, which is nice, and some damage resist. So you don't have to actually get those up on your own, but they're not that hard to get up on your own. So you just practice sneaking and hiding. High elves cannot be rogues. Humans, of course, can be rogues. And once again, humans are good at it. They're not great at it, they're just good at it. Ixar, no roguey. Trolls, ogres, no rogues. Vashir, yes rogue. And they don't come into Luckland, so 115. Not bad. Not bad, not great, but not bad. Not as, again, we go to the Dwarf Rogue, and they're banging around at 115, so that's pretty nice, honestly. Wood Elves, again, not bad. They do get Hide as a racial, and they get Forage. The only rogue that gets Forage. Froglocks can be rogues. Not bad. Not great, but not bad. And Draken, I'm not playing that long. Sorry, guys, I'm not. Shadow Knights. If you want to make a Shadow Knight, you should make a Troll Shadow Knight. Not a Troll. You should make a Ogre Shadow Knight. Look at that incredibly small intelligence. Wow, they're ugly. That's okay, though. We still love them. Ogres, we're getting into the most broken race in the game. They are the Ogres. This is only true in Classic. Ogres get stun immunity from the front. So if you get hit with a melee stun from the front, it doesn't affect you. That's huge. For a tank class, that is particularly huge. For a solo class, that's very nice. But for a tank in particular, you're going to be getting hit from the front all the time. That's your job. So Paladins get hit from the front. Rangers hit from the front. Shadow Knights hit from the front. Warriors hit from the front. It's a big difference being able to get that stun immunity. Low intelligence, which means you're not able to cast as many spells before you have to sit and meditate. But your strength is ridiculously high. Your agility, you need to get that up to 75. Your dexterity, you should probably get that up to 75. Stamina, again, it's ridiculous. I would actually take my points out of stamina, and I would probably put 5 here, 5 here, and 10 here. Get my intelligence up to 80. I've done it where I got my intelligence up to 90, which really helped with being able to cast a decent amount. But I was a little bit behind everybody else on getting my melee skills up and my defensive skills up, and I tended to take a few more hits than other classes until my agility and dexterity got to 75. 75 is some number in their algorithm that, does whatever. I've started with these guys. Trolls were a lot of people's choice back in Classic for a great Shadow Knight class, because they are a great race for a Shadow Knight. Why? They get regen. Their stats are very good. They're the second highest strength and stamina in the game. Their stats are very good, and they get regen. And regen doesn't really matter much until you hit 50, when it starts actually getting better and better. In 60, it's considerable. But for that same reason, you may want to consider an Ixar Shadow Knight, because they get the armor bonus, and they get the innate armor bonus, and they get the regen. They make very nice Shadow Knights. But again, that stun immunity for a tank is just phenomenal. Eventually, you'll have alternate advancement points that can do that for you, the stun immunity. But you won't have it in Classic, or in Kunark, or in Velius, and I don't think it comes out until POP, so you don't have it in Lucklin either. Something to think about. Vashir cannot be. Wood Elves cannot be. Froglocks can be, but we are not playing with Froglocks. They are cute, though. They look like Kermit the Frog now. Humans make okay Shadow Knights. Imagine that. Humans are okay at something. They are. They make okay Shadow Knights. High Elves cannot be Shadow Knights. Halflings, nope. Nope for Half Elves. Yes for Gnomes, but not until Lucklin. Or Velius. I don't remember which. Same with Rangers. So, Gnomes and Halflings cannot be hybrid classes until a later expansion. Erudites can be Shadow Knights. Highest intelligence in the game. It's worth thinking about. Yeah, I would take those points out of stamina and throw them into strength. And then dwarves cannot be Shadow Knights. Barbarians cannot be Shadow Knights, but Dark Elves can. This is actually probably the third most popular choice, because it goes Ixar and Ogres, and then these guys right here, Dark Elves, because Dark Elves are, frankly, cool looking. Excuse me. They have high intelligence. Their strength is not anything to write home about, neither is their stamina. It's not going to stop you from playing the class or enjoying it, but that frontal stun with Ogres is just unbelievably useful. Wow. And just so you can see what the guys look like, there you go. In the first couple of weeks of a TLP, well, during all of Classic on a TLP, the Mask of Deception can be, well, it can only be equipped by rogues and bards. It can be clicked in from your inventory. It's actually called the Mask of the Deceiver, or Deceiver's Mask, or whatever it's called. I suggest getting it so you can shrink down, because ogres are gigantic. Again, all utility of a necromancer. There's a spell necromancers get called Vampiric Embrace, where your melee attacks actually steal health from your enemies. You're going to have that up all the time as a Shadow Knight. It's worth having up. You hold aggro by casting your lowest level disease spell, which is Infectious Cloud. It does almost no damage, but you just spam it on the enemy. It costs almost no mana, and you can hold aggro decently well. Better than a warrior. You're the second best aggro holder in the game after Rangers. Yeah. Ogres make excellent tanks. Shadow Knights make excellent tanks. Shadow Knights get Feign Death. I mentioned that with the monk. Shadow Knight, but it's a spell. It takes 1 second to cast, so your timing has to be good. Yeah, so they can feign death. They can turn themselves invisible. They can cast Invis Undead on themselves or others. All the utility of a necromancer, and but as a melee, your dots are only okay. All of your damage spells are additional to the melee damage you do. You can solo because you can Fear Kite. So you get all the darkness. You get the darkness line. Do you get it as soon as a necromancer? No, but you get the darkness line of spells. So you pull them and you get a pet. You get a very low-level pet. It's just a skeleton. You don't get to charm pet like necros do, but it's a skeleton, and you can give it a weapon or two, probably a rusty weapon or something, some common weapon you pick up. You give it a weapon, and I treat it as a dot when I play a Shadow Knight, because I don't usually have a pet up while I'm tanking in a group because they die too quickly when they do take damage. I might throw one up at the beginning of the fight, but I'm not worried about it. It's just nice to have that little bit of extra damage, and that's all it is a little bit of extra damage. He's not going to hold aggro for you like a necro pet will, because he's not your level. By the time you're 50, I think your pet is like 30. So it will hit most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time. It won't ever pull aggro off you. It's just there to do a little bit of extra damage. It's not as good as a shaman pet. and shaman pets are much lower level. It's just a nice little pet to have. Um, they're a fun class, a lot of utility. Again, invis to undead, snare. I don't know if Shadow Knights get root. I think eventually they do. They're never going to root rot a mob dead because their dots are too low level. All your dots do damage while you're fighting. Um, you're more interested in your direct damages because if you're in a group, things are generally going down pretty fast. Dots are generally not group friendly. There are exceptions. There's lots of exceptions. There's some quick acting dots, envenomed something or other towards the end of the game is very, very fast acting. You can actually use that in groups, but that's for a necromancer. I don't think you get that until Kunark with a Shadow Knight. I don't know. Fun class, incredibly useful. Probably the best group tank in the game. You can't pull off them. Rogues have a hard time pulling off them. Wizards have a hard time pulling off them. Um, they just hold aggro incredibly well. It's a fun class, very useful. Always easy to get a group if you want a group. I mean, always easy. Looking for a tank for such and such a group. You can off tank like crazy in the during raids. You'll probably there's very few encounters where you would actually be the the main tank over a warrior in a raid. But as far as a group goes, it's probably the best class for tanking in the game. Again, like a paladin, they get the same max level defensive abilities like a warrior does. And yeah, they can't dual wield, so they'll either sword and board or they will do two-hander. Their epic is a two-hander, just like the paladin's epic is a two-hander. Um, yeah, fun class. I don't have much more to tell you about it. Uh, if you do pick a dark elf, you do get hide, so you can do that pulling trick I was talking about with, but it's only a hide up to 50 for the racial ability. It's not a guarantee like it is for a rogue, and it's less of a guarantee than a maxed out ranger who maxes out at 75. I think bards get hide too. They might be able to pull that off. Yeah, Shadow Knight, incredibly fun class. Again, feign death. You now necros should never die because they have feign death. So when everything goes to crap and everybody else is gating, a necro, if they're smart, will just feign death, like a monk would. Takes a second for it to cast. Feign death is a very useful spell to have. You can feign pull the way a monk does, but it's a monk's instant, and yours takes a second to land. Something to think about. Shaman. There are 4 races for shaman. Barbarians, who have the highest wisdom, and it is a wisdom class. It is a wisdom-based casting class. In classic, you can either be a barbarian, an ogre, or a troll. Those are your only options for shaman. This is the one you want. In Kunark, you can also be an Ixar shaman, who now have the highest wisdom in the game for shaman. They also get regen, which is why one of the 2 reasons you want to be a troll. The other reason you want to be a troll is not only do you want to be a troll, you want to make sure you can either follow Khazak-Thul or Inarok. You want to follow Inarok if you'd go this route. Why? Same reason that you'd want to be a dark elf cleric. Because a troll shaman, as a follower of Inarok, can do that same quest that I talked about 2 hours ago to get an amulet that you have to put on to use it that casts a snare. And at that point, because you do get fear as a shaman, you can fear kite. And as easy as it is for shaman to solo already, that just makes it a little bit easier. Does anyone actually do that? Nope, everyone makes an Ixar, unless they're too ugly for you and then you make a barbarian. Do not scoff at the too ugly thing. It is hard for me to play an ugly class. It's not impossible. I know Buse will not play them, they're too ugly. And this is a representation of you. And I don't look anything like that, but I don't look anything like this either. I don't know why they made them so, I don't know, so much character. And if you keep clicking, you can get a, no, it's not changing. Oh, it's this. You can see all the different hairstyles and tattoos and whatnot barbarians get. But trolls in Classic have the biggest advantage with regen, because like necromancers, trolls, shaman can trade health for mana. It's a spell called Cannibalize. It's a one-time thing. It's not an ongoing buff. Like Necros have an ongoing buff. These guys cannibalize. Well, you can cannibalize one right after another, so which is pretty cool. As soon as it's got a very low recast timer on it, so you can just go right into the next cast. Shaman can wear shields like clerics can, and oh, that's Shadow Knight. Oopsie. Shaman can wear shields like clerics can. Clerics and I guess druids can wear certain shields too. Um, yeah, they're now I haven't really got into anything shaman actually do. I've just talked about the races. Shaman are arguably the best soloing class in the game. Some people say it's enchanter, some people say it's necromancer, and some people say it's shaman. What is agreed upon is that all of them are fantastic soloers. Uh, Shaman are the best buffing class in the game, and they get a weak pet. It's better than a Shadow Knight pet, but it's worse than a Necro pet. It is not a charmed pet. You summon this little wolf to come fight with you, which is pretty cool. And then, I forget if it's Kunark or Velius, but eventually you can turn into a bear, which is pretty cool. Oh, that's the other thing. Rangers and Druids can turn into wolves, which is cool. Little function thing. But eventually Shaman get the ability to turn into bears. It's not in Classic. It's one of the not much later, but it's a slightly later expansion. It might even be as late as Lachlan. But you get a little pet dog, and if you buff that dog up with all of your buffs, and you have a ton of buffs, you can buff armor. Who's the best armor buffer in the game? Or defensive buffer in the game? Clerics. Who's the best? And druids get a regen buff, and so do shaman, but it stacks with their natural regen for trolls and Ixar. Who gets the best regen buffs in the game? That's a toss-up between druids and shaman, but they both get absurd, very good regen buffs. I think eventually they both get chloroplast. Anyway, eventually. It might be Kunark or Velius or whatever. But they get a regen buff. They get an armor buff. They get a hit point buff. The best hit point buff in the game. No, that's still clerics. A great hit point buff. They get strength buffs. They get dex buffs. They get agility buffs. They can buff your intelligence, your wisdom. They can buff your charisma. They can buff all of your basic stats. They can buff your attack. They can increase your attack speed. They get the best slows in the game. They don't get a snare unless you go, troll and a rock. They don't, but they do get root early on. They are the masters of root rotting when it comes to soloing. You just park a mob with root, and you drop a couple of dots on it, and you throw your pet on it, and when it breaks, you just you root it again, and you let your dots work on it. It's easy peasy. It's fun. You don't really want to do it too much in dungeons, though I got a buddy named Kuman who was absolutely fantastic at it. Shamans are the second best healers in the game. Some say they're the best because they can slow the mobs. So if the mob is doing less damage, your tank is taking less damage. Let's put this on Ixar. Yeah, that's the reason why they're the second best healers in the game, because they get the same healing spells that druids get, but they also get slows. So your main tank is taking significantly less damage. It is a noticeable amount of less damage if you're slowing the mobs that take a while to kill. If you're going through mobs so fast that it's not mana efficient to put slows on them, stop putting slows on them. It's not rocket surgery here. So when you're fighting a mob and you may not even root rot them. You may just put your pet on it and have your pet have taunt on, and then slow the mob so it's doing significantly less damage to your pet, your little doggy, your little 10 levels below you dog pet, little wolfy pet that you got with you. And They're just fantastic soloers. They're fantastic groupers. They keep everybody buffed up. The one thing they can't buff for other people is mana regen. Only bards and enchanters can do that. In classic, and beast lords get a little one too, a little mana regen as well. They're just shaman are great at soloing. They're great at grouping. Everybody always wants a shaman in their group. People will take them over clerics toward end game when slows become important. I like one in addition to my cleric because that lets the shaman actually focus on slowing and debuffing and getting in the occasional dot. They have a few direct damages, not many, but their direct damages are very mana efficient. So they're not a direct damage class like wizards, which we're eventually getting to, or mages, but they can do direct damage. They're just it's a great class. They're the only class that can do alchemy. I didn't mention with rogues. I didn't mention that rogues are the only class that can do poison making, and they can apply poison to their blade. Because in classic, back in the day, and on a TLP, it's not worth your time or your money. Some people still do it, and more power to them. If that's your gameplay style, go for it. But shaman can make alchemy potions, and those alchemy potions are game changing. So you will pay for your alchemy making by selling potions in the East Commons, or once you get a couple of clients, then those clients, the end game players and raid leaders, if they don't have guild leaders, if they don't have an alchemist in their group, in their guild, they will come to the best alchemists in the server and say, hey, I need 200 so potions, I need so many this potion and that potion for the raid, I need 100 of them, I need 200 of them, and they'll happily pay you absurd amounts of money for these things. And if you price it right, you can make a fortune. Kuman did. I know other alchemists who have. Join a guild, have everybody send their components that they pick up for alchemy supplies to you, and then in turn give them, potions back at cost for your guild anyway. But Kuman made a fortune selling potions, and then he always had potions to use, and that's how they get their mana regen. Is there's clarity style potions, celestials, something or other. There's greater concentration potions which stack with clarity. There's regen potions. There's hit point potions. There's health potions. There's just all sorts of different potions you can make. There's potions to turn you into different player characters if you need to do quests. So if you've got to do a turn in and you're kill on sight where you're going, you can get a potion from a good alchemist, a shaman, and you can turn into that other player character for half an hour or whatever it is and do your quest turn-ins. They have teleport potions. Now they can't teleport in the same way that a druid or a wizard can, but they can, and they're not cheap. Like a teleport potion, a gate potion costs generally 200 plat. That's nothing to scoff at, especially at the beginning of the game. But once you've got one character up to 60 that you're playing all the time, 200 plat is not that expensive to pay for a gate potion for a melee class. So you might buy a stack, like 10, a stack of 10 gate potions, so you can always gate when you need to. That's pretty useful. And shamans are the only place you can get alchemy stuff from. If you want to solo in the game, you might want to invest in a lot of potions, because a lot of your shortcomings can be made up with potions. So classes that can't solo, like rogues, who have a hard time with soloing, even though they do a lot of damage, they have to be behind the mob to do the damage. And if they're fighting the mob, then the mob is going to turn around to face them all the time. Rogues actually end up soloing by getting a snare poison and hitting their opponent with a snare poison. Then they use the skill intimidation to make them feared and run away, and then they can just backstab them the whole way. Or you could just team up with somebody who has fear, like a cleric or a necromancer, and it's absurd the kind of damage you can do. What else? A shaman. They're just a fantastic class. They're not. They fill a lot of different roles, but they're not in the same way as a bard or a druid, a multi-tool. They're they're less of a multi-tool in that sense. Do they get fear? Yeah, they get fear. Anyway, fun class. Great solo class. One of the top solo classes in the game. Highly recommended. A lot of fun. Um, yeah. Now comes the warrior. Now, almost everybody can play a warrior. So, barbarians, yes. Dark elves, yes. Dwarfs, yes. Erudites, no. High elves, no. Halfling, yes. Half elf, yes. Gnome, yes. Human, yes. Ixar, yes. Ogre, of course. Trolls, yes. Fashir, yes. Wood elves, yes. Froglocks, yes. And Draken, yes. Now, if you're going to play a warrior, I highly recommend an ogre in Classic. Play whatever makes you happy. If you can't stand looking at them and you hate being gigantic, you might want to consider a dwarf for the stats. But again, the same frontal stun I was talking about with Shadow Knights is just as true with the warrior. Warriors get very little to no utility. What warriors are good at is being hit in the face and hitting someone back. That is what they're there for. That is the main thing they are there for, is to get punched in the face and then punch somebody back in the face. That is what they do. I would actually, if I was doing this, I would take 3 points out of stamina and I would put them into strength to up your damage. And dexterity, I would take 5 points out of here and I would put them into dexterity to make sure your dexterity is 75. And that is what I do when I make an ogre warrior, and they just go from there and destroy everything. Uh, they have almost no utility. They do get the intimidation skill that all melees get to attempt to fear. They have both the highest offensive skills and defensive skills in the game. Um, Having said that, they're not the best when it comes to damage. Um, they're not bad. They do enough damage. They can one-on-one fight most even cons or blue cons. They have a pretty good chance of beating a blue con. One, if they could somehow solo pull one blue con, one slightly lower level con, and they're at full health, and they're very gear dependent. All tanks are gear dependent. That's just the way it is. They need high AC, and they have access to the highest AC. They're the only class that's not true. Rangers and rogues technically can too, but you will see warriors sword and board. You will see them two-hand. You will see them dual wield. They can use almost any weapon in the game. Um, they generally hold. So you have the taunt skill. All 4 of the main tanking classes have the taunt skill, and that helps put you at the top. If a taunt succeeds, which hopefully it will, so there's a skill check. If it succeeds, it puts you at the top of the aggro list of the mob. That's what it does. It doesn't just raise you, it puts you at the top. So you don't just want to spam taunt when you actually want to hold someone's attention. You want to spam taunt to, raise a skill, but that's in general fighting when you're in a group on smaller stuff. When you're actually fighting something you have to have the attention of, like a boss, you hold off on using, or once you cap taunt out, you hold off on using taunt until you lose aggro. When you lose aggro, you hit taunt, it snaps the aggro right back to you. Well, that wasn't working. It worked just fine in Classic. You had to understand how the mechanic worked, but I played a warrior in Classic. It worked great. Later on, that wasn't working anymore. So they added in a melee tome called Provoke, and you get it, I think, at level 20. And what Provoke does is it just adds to your... it increases the amount of aggro you get from every attack that lands. And it uses up some of your stamina bar, but your stamina regens quickly. So most fights, you're going to fire off that Provoke once you hit level 20 and you get Provoke. You're going to fire off that Provoke on almost every mob, or every other mob. Definitely on every taunt, every high-level named mob you guys fight as a group. But you're just going to be provoking every mob. And once you get a Provoke on a mon, once it lands, and it's resisted by disease resist of all things, which is generally low for most mobs, once that provoke lands, which it should, you just keep hitting, and you're going to stay high. It's going to keep you higher in the aggro list. The only reason they brought Melee Tomes, which is a book you have to buy from a vendor, the only reason they brought Tomes into the game at all was because of warriors, because they felt provoke should be used to help warriors, that it was a skill warriors would need. So that's the only reason why Melee Tomes are on TLPs, is because of warriors. They don't come into the game until Velius or Lucklin or whatever, normally, back in Classic. So there's only 2 vendors of Melee Tomes in the entire game in Classic. It's not true come Kunark, I think. And one is in West Freeport and one is in East Commons. And the East Commons guy isn't always there. So I've been on TLPs where he's not there in Classic, and I've been on TLPs where he was there in Classic. Hopefully he will be from now on. And it only goes up to level 20. The melee tomes available are Throwstone, which gives you a 10 meter, 10 foot, whatever, a range. No weapon ranged attack that does 1 damage. Elbow Strike, which is a melee range attack that does stun damage. That does 5 damage, not stun damage, just 5 damage. Has a particle effect. It looks cool. It's something to do when you have nothing else to do. And the pure melee classes, rogues, warriors, and monks can get the first 3 of these. So you can get Throwstone. You can get Throwstone. You can get what do you call it? Elbow Strike, and you can get Discipline of Will, which increases your regen rate for a limited time, and then it has a high cooldown. And then you can get the Tome of Provoke. Those are the only tomes you can buy in Classic. And the whole reason they're there is so warriors can get the Provoke skill. That's it. And the main way you hold aggro is by doing damage. You are the only class in the game that can crit with melee attacks in Classic. You can do it from level 1 on. And that increases your damage output. It doesn't really put you on par with any of the other damage dealers, but it does help. And it helps you hold aggro. And then your proc rate. You get a nice proccing weapon like a short sword of Yakisha, you throw a Wolfenite augment in there, and you're going to be holding aggro just fine. You throw Provoke on there for fights where you start losing aggro, and you have Taunt ready in case you need to snap aggro back to you. That's how you play a warrior. Later on, when other disciplines come in and you can become invulnerable and whatnot, all of those are nice. If you get below 20% health or something like that, you rage, where you start doing double damage, which is also nice, and that doesn't go away unless you go over 45% health. So if you've got a smart healer in your group, and they let you get down to where you start getting into your berserker rage, and then instead of using complete heal, they'll monitor you very closely and make sure your health is staying between 45% and 0. It's a razor's edge dancing that dance. You've got to get a healer who's really paying attention, which is not most healers. Certainly not me when I'm a healer. I don't even consider doing stuff like that back in the day, because Berserker Rage was not implemented back when I was a healer. And I don't really play healers that often anymore. That's one of the things about playing a cleric, is I haven't done it in a while. But I don't think I'm going to. I'm going Ranger for this TLP. Maybe next year we'll give it a try. Maybe if Ranger doesn't turn out to be everything I hope and dream it will be, I'll give Cleric a try. I don't know. Anyway, Warriors. So that Berserker Strength, that's nice. Beyond that, there's not that much more to say. Because they have the highest damage mitigation, and their gear helps them get the best resists, Warriors make the best. They're the best at damage mitigation, so they're the best for holding raid bosses, because they take less damage. If you're playing it smart, you're using your disciplines well, which is not Classic, but I think it's Kunark and Velius. If you're using your disciplines well, and you know the fight, you have to know the fight, you're going to be able to hold not only hold aggro, but mitigate more damage than any other class. That's the way it is. Um, Warriors are the best raid tank. Are they a good group tank? Yes, they're a very good group tank. I've leveled Warriors up to 50. I think I've leveled 3 of them up to 50 in the various TLPs I played. 2 or 3. Um, and then we'd get somebody. So I don't love raid tanking. It's fine. I'm good at it. I'm not great at it. I'm good at most of this game. I'm not great at everything in it. So I'll speed run a warrior up to 50 because I can guarantee you if you play a tank, you will always get a group. All you have to say is looking for group, and people are always looking to replace their tank. Tanks get groups, so enchanters are the fastest people to get a group, then tanks, then healers, because that's the way it is. Tanks are not a popular class to play in general. Um, there's not a lot of love that tanks get, and it's kind of boring, um, honestly. But it's I don't mind doing it. I just don't love doing it. You might get asked to pull, and when you're a tank pulling, you're just going out grabbing as many. You're grabbing a 3 or 4 mobs, and you better have an enchanter or somebody in the group who can then crowd control, like a bard, enchanter or bard, or even if you're pulling melee mobs, then a wizard or a cleric to root them for you. Um, Warriors are. I actually enjoy playing a warrior. I enjoy playing Shadow Knights and Warriors for tanks. Um, yeah, uh, it's a fun class if you want to be loved by your guild and learn how to be a main tank. Being a tank in a group is not hard. Being a tank in a raid is hard. It takes a lot more work to tank in a raid than it does in a group. Um, yeah, fun class to play. You can't solo for anything. You can't heal yourself. You can't snare the mob. You just can't do any of those things. And yeah, but so you're not really going to be playing a lot solo. You can, you know, if you wanted to farm low-level mobs for supplies, you can do that on any melee class. Uh, Warriors are fine at it, but they have to take more breaks, and you're going to max out your bind wound skill pretty more than any other class because you don't have any healing. You and rogues and monks, you're all going to have really good bind wound skills if you do any soloing. Even just that farming stuff I'm talking about, where you're killing stuff 10, 15 levels lower than you, you're still going to need to stop and bind wound, get up back up to 75% health, and go at it again. Okay. Be sure to buy bandages. It's a money-intensive class because your armor determines how many hits you can take. And they're very gear dependent in that sense. Um, I'm not saying it's a boring class to play. It's just a lot of people aren't into it, which is why there's so much call for tanks. They're just not all that available. Oh well. And now we go to the last class, Wizards. I love Wizards. Not many people do, but I do. I've mained 2 Wizards. I main mages more often, but yeah. One, I just loved maining it. It was so much fun. Wizards are not hard to play well. They're just not. They do damage. That's what they do. They're the premier magic damage dealing class in the game. Out of the damage dealing classes, they're the worst at it right now. Um, they're not bad at it. They're just the worst at it because when a mob resists your damage, and okay, let's talk a minute about damage DPS. So DPS stands for damage per second. It's how Everquest got us thinking about this probably more than any other game in the history of gaming, and now DPS is standard for damage dealer. We just call them DPS in all games. You call them that in WoW, you call them that in even in, I've heard people playing D&D call them, I'm just a DPS, and I'm like, that's not even remotely accurate to the game you're playing, but that's okay. Damage per second. So in a long fight, how much damage are you actually doing? That's one way of looking at it. In old school, back in the day, live, classic, the king of DPS, as I told you, was the rogue. Right now, it is the monk. So let's just go to humans so I can actually click on the different classes. Right now, it's the monk. The monk is the king of DPS outside of pets classes right now. It used to be the rogue, who are still fantastic at it, though they're not. They don't get a lot of love in EverQuest nowadays, but they're still fantastic at DPS. Wizards are not fantastic at DPS. There's two kinds of direct damage. Uh, the, well, there's two kinds of damage, and you look at it in two different ways. We call it DPS, or damage over time, and spike damage, or direct damage, if you're talking about spells. And wizards are the kings of direct damage, or queens, or emperors, or whatever you want to call it. They're just fantastic at direct damage. But they're not great at damage over time. They're good, they're very good, but they're not great at it because they don't have that auto attack. They're not constantly doing what we call in this game white damage. No, we call that in WoW? I don't remember. But they don't have an auto attack. They just sit and meditate to get their mana back, and then they stand up and nuke. That is how you play a wizard. You sit, you wait, you stand up, you nuke once, maybe twice, you sit back down, and you meditate some more. You don't go and pull because you need to be meditating to get your mana back up. That is what you're here for. You do damage. Do they have some utility spells? Yeah, we'll get into that in a minute. But right now, this is what play looks like in a group for a wizard. The puller goes, you're not the puller. The puller goes and gets some mobs, brings them back to the group. Puller might be the tank, might not be the tank. The enchanter immediately starts, or the bard, starts mezzing stuff and dealing with crowd control. The tank picks his target or her target, and they start whacking on one target. Yay, one target whacking. What do you do as a wizard? You sit there and think about your navel. Oh, navel, 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 navel. Sorry, that's an old joke. That's an old comedy routine from the 80s. Anyway, or 70s, I forget. So you're sitting there navel gazing, and you just wait. When the mob gets down to about 80% health, it's preferable if you wait till they get them down to 70% health. But you can do it at 80 most of the time, and you won't draw aggro most of the time. I recommend you wait till 70. When the mob gets down to 70% health, as a wizard, you stand up. I told you this was exciting. So you stand up, you cast, and you start casting your spell. By the time your spell goes off, the mob's health is probably down to 50%, which is why you can do this at 80, because then the mob's health would be down at 60%. When your spell lands, you're going to generate a ton of aggro. You're going to go up on the aggro list, which is why you wait, because you want the warrior, the tank, the shadow knight, the ranger, the paladin, to have enough of the mob's attention that when you drop that much damage on them, because you're going to do a lot of damage with that spell, you don't take its attention away from the tank. That's why you wait until it's at 80% until you start. If it's a long cast, you might start at 80. If it's a shorter cast, you wait until the mob's at 70%. You're going to drop one spell on them. In lower levels, you might drop two. What you're looking to do is about 20% of the mob's health in damage. That's your goal. You might end up doing 30. That's it. And you do it all that fast. In an instant. In one nuke. Sometimes two. That's it. And you don't want to be the one who finishes the mob off. You want to be the one who does a significant portion of their damage in one hit. Then you sit back down and you start medding again. You start navel gazing. Oh, navel, 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 navel. That's what wizard life looks like most of the time. It's actually a lot of what cleric life looks like most of the time. You get some of the best. You get roots earlier than most other classes. I believe you get them earliest. It might be clerics. No, it's you. It might be enchanters. Enchanters get stuff wicked early. But you get your roots, and you should always have a root up. Why should you always have a root up? In case you need to do some emergency crowd control. In case things get away from your enchanter is just learning what they're doing, or your bard loses it, or whatever. That root can save lives. Beyond that, you're the only class in the game to get an area effect snare besides a bard. I'm not sure if Bard gets it or not. I know you do. Uh, Wizards are masters of AoE kiting, where you get somebody gathers up 4 mobs, because you can only hit 4 mobs at once with your AoE spells, and then you have them chase that one guy around, or all of you around, and you turn around and you nuke them. You get far enough away that your AoE spell will go off. You target one mob, it hits all 4 of them, and you guys can level really, really fast. You can do it. Druids can do this. Wizards can do this. It's better to do it in a group with other AoE casters. I forget which other classes can AoE nuke. Can AoE, not nuke, can AoE kite. But they'll go to an outside zone and they'll kill very fast. Then everyone will sit down and get their mana back in a safe spot, and then you'll get up and you'll do it again and again and again. It is a fast way to level. It is fun. It's a skill you got to learn. It's not an easy one to you don't just jump into it being great at it. Well, maybe some people do, but I certainly didn't. That's not why I liked Wizards. I liked sitting. I liked the talking. My nukes were important, especially in group content. I never let my mana get up to 100%, like I was saying with the cleric. Or the mage. I never let my mana get to 100% full, unless I need to take a bathroom break and everybody keeps playing around me, which is fine. Yeah. Otherwise, I was always at most 90%. I'm always looking to use mana. What else did I do? You should keep your stun up, because stun is going to help. You have a damaging stun that you can, if the enchanter's charm pet breaks, you can stun it for them if they're taking too much damage and they need help. So be aware of that, but that doesn't happen very often. But be aware of it. Yeah, mostly you get 3 different kinds of damage. You get magic damage, you get frost damage, and you get fire damage. And very few mobs are resistant to all 3 of those kinds of magical damage. So if one of them doesn't work, use a different kind. You're also the guy who, when things start going to crap, which hopefully they don't, maybe something's starting to attack your cleric, and your crowd control guy hasn't noticed it, you can either root it and have the cleric back up, or if you have to, you can just nuke it down. Like, you reserve, you hold your mana in reserve for those situations where you have to stand up and just kill something fast. And that is actually how you solo as a wizard. And the reason why soloing as a wizard isn't popular is because your mana regen stinks. It's no worse than anyone else's mana regen in the game, but you are completely dependent on your mana. Mages have pets. Enchanters don't use a lot of mana for most of their spells. Necromancers and enchanters get, clarity for regen. Necromancers get their self-regen, Dark Pact health for mana thing I was telling you about. And druids will eventually get a small mana regen on their skin-like nature when they hit 50 or 60 or whatever. Not wizards. No, not wizards. Wizards, eventually, later on, they'll get familiars that boost their mana regen and some other stuff, and later on in the game, wizards are fantastic. But right now, not so much. Are they wanted? Yes. They're the only ones who can, and you can teleport. You have amazing teleport skills. You can go all over the world, easy, and that fast. You're all the way across the world. You're only class that can actually take you to the planes of Sky and Hate. You can teleport to both Sky and Hate, and people will pay you big money for those teleports. And yeah, it's very nice utility, honestly. But that, one of the ways you solo as a wizard is you root nuke. So you would root something, and then you just nuke it until the root breaks, and it takes about 4 nukes in general to kill an even con. So you can hunt even cons if you can keep them rooted and far enough away, if you can get your snare on them, so you can run far enough away, turn around, and get a nuke off before they hit you again. You are a squishy, you are going to take damage. You might want to consider playing a high elf because of the cultural armor that comes out later. I think Velius, maybe Kunark, I was telling you about. But that stuff's not easy to come by. You might want to be a dark elf so you can hide while you meditate. You might want to be an erudite, which is where I usually go for the ridiculous intelligence. So think about it. Yeah, I really enjoyed being an erudite. I like being, I like Tox Forest. Um, Not that much, but I loved being able to teleport to wherever I wanted to be in the world. I could get there quick, and I had a reputation as being a wizard who was excellent at their class. I knew when to nuke, I knew when not to nuke, which is what you learn how to do as a wizard or a mage, especially a wizard, and you get the highest damage nukes in the game. As far as using AoE spells on single targets, which I highly recommend, um, AoE spells, you what happens with your rain, and I don't know remember if they're called rain or if that's mages, but something like rain of fire or column or whatever it's called for a wizard. Um, what it does is it comes in 4 waves. The damage comes in 4 waves, and it will hit uh, all the targets in the area, and it will split the damage between all 4 targets in the area. And if there's only one target in the area, then that one target takes all that damage up to a maximum amount. So you actually will do more damage to 4 targets, but if you only have one damage, if you only have one target to damage, all of that one target takes all of that damage. It is the most mana efficient damage dealing in the game. It's crazy how much damage it does. Save it for bosses and save it for when you've only got one mob left up. So unless you have the area of effect memorized, which you figure out through trial and error, you don't want to use area effect spells if you're in a mezzing situation where you've got, if the enchanter has a bunch of mobs on pause, you don't want to be the one to break those that pause. So you can do an absurd amount of damage to a single target, and it's very nice. But wizards are all about knowing when to do absurd damage. Again, it's not damage over time, it is spike damage. It is direct damage. Um, yeah, I think that covers all of it. I talked about stuns, I talked about the AoE snare, I talked about um, area of effect, uh, what do you call it? Kiting. Talked about what it actually looks like to solo with a wizard. Very fun class. And one of the cool things about wizards, and I didn't talk that much about gear for other classes, but one of the cool things about wizards is they have access to a um, quest for the Staff of the Wheel. Um, I think this quest is called Tartan Wheel, something like that. And it is a +10 intelligence staff. It's very nice. And you can do it technically at level 1. I've done it at level 1 for one of my. I had a level 50 druid helping me, but all you do is you go around the world, and you need a little bit of invisibility versus undead if you're not high enough level to fight off the outside mobs of unrest. So there's one in unrest. You need an invis versus undead for that, and then you need invisibility, which I believe wizards get invisibility at level 4 or level 8. I want to say level 4. So the second wizard I mained, I did this at level 4, and had somebody cast invisibility and undead for me, or I did it at level 10 or whatever. Have somebody cast invisibility, but the first time when I did it at level 1, I had my druid buddy. He's like, "This is awesome. Let's do this." So he ported me around because I couldn't teleport yet, and you just go to all these different places and you pick, and they're all ground spawns. There's 10 of them. So we picked up all 10 ground spawns, and you make a Staff of the Wheel, which you will use that until you get your epic, or the equivalent in Kunark. It is a +10 int, one-hand blunt staff. So I leveled up. I had an enchanter uh, alt. You only have to be level 8 or so, 8 or 12 or something on an enchanter. And I would run around the world and do Stein of Magok with my enchanter alt. And so I got the Stein of Magok in my offhand, and which is +10 int, and the Staff of the Wheel in my primary hand, and that's +10 int. And with my erudite wizard, that brought me up to 152 int, giving me a massive mana pool at a very low level. And I just played, and I had a blast, and literally a blast. It was a lot of fun. It's not for everybody. It's not for most people. Wizards is one of the least played classes. Wizards and rogues, and rangers to some degree. But it was a lot of fun. Um, I think being a mage was actually more fun, all said and done, because it's the same thing with weaker nukes and a pet. And you don't get to teleport. I loved teleporting. Um, Again, it's not for everybody. That's one of the great things about this game is there is something for everybody. If you like one of these things that I've been talking about, you might hate something else that I've been talking about. That's the way it is for me. I didn't talk about trade skills. I really don't like trade skills that much. I find it tedious for a low reward. So I love it when I find somebody who loves trade skills and they can do the trade skills and I'll just feed them money to do their trade skills that I get from adventuring and then they give me whatever I need from the trade skills that I paid for them, or and we're good. And I'm off leveling and adventuring and having a good time and fighting, and they're trade skilling, and then we'll adventure together from time to time. And yeah, I don't mind feeding stuff to somebody to trade skill for me instead of having to do it myself. Because, and on the other hand, that stops them from needing to go off and fight in all these remote locations to pick up these rare pieces they need for trade skills. Because I love fighting. Yeah, saving the day as a wizard. That was just I didn't know I could do that until I did it, and it was a blast. Like I was saving the day. I was the guy who saved the party time and again. Or when a mob starts running away and there's nobody's got a snare on it, both as a wizard and a mage instead of well, mages can't snare, but as a wizard I would just nuke it. Throw off a I'd have a medium level nuke on me. I'd have my so I would keep up my two best top nukes, single target nukes. I'd keep up my top AoE, and then I'd keep up a medium uh, level, like something in between the lowest level and whatever level I'm at, for finishing off mobs, and that's what I'd use. Yeah, it was fun to play. The other item you really want to pick up as a wizard is called the Staff of Temporal Flux, which actually reduces cold resist and fire resist on your target. It's an instant clicky. It's not a particularly hard quest to do, though it is, like most quests, time consuming. You got to wait for your spawns to actually come up and then drop the pieces you need. Nobody else is really hunting those two particular spawns because the pieces you need only work for the Staff of Temporal Flux. But they might want the spawns for something else. So if somebody else wants to camp the same spawn, you usually say to them, "Hey, do you mind if I loot this if it drops?" And they're like, "Yeah, if you help me kill it." And so you form a group and you make friends. But those three items, the Stein of Magok, the which an enchanter, not on a free loot server like Teak or Mischief, or even free loot among your characters server like Oakland was. But on any other kind of server, any normal server, enchanters are one of the only classes that can do the Stein of Magok quest because you have to have faction with four or five different cities, including Agok, which is the ogre hometown. But yeah, those three items, and my wizard was okay to go until 50, and then I hit 50 and I got all the gear I wanted, and then Kunark came out, and I got all the gear I wanted there, and killed a whole bunch of mobs and dragons, and had a really good time. So I hope that's what you guys have if you're playing EverQuest. This has gone over 3 hours, which is a long time for me to talk in what's effectively one sitting. One sitting, no edits. Ow, my voice is killing me. Um, Truckers, I hope you had a good time. I doubt anyone's going to watch this all the way through one time, but if you do, hey, more power to you. And I should probably send this to Views to break this up into, all the different classes. Anyway, more power to you, truckers. Keep on trucking.